Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ashley Renee Lyons. Ashley Renee Lyons was born on July 21, 1985 in Scott County. She was active in the FFA program at Scott County High School, graduating in 2003. Ashley's brother Chris shared her passion for repairing cars, but her true interest was her boyfriend Roger McBe. After they broke up, Ashley discovered she was pregnant with his child. On January 7, 2004, Ashley learned she was having a boy and was overjoyed. She told her mom and brother about her plans to meet Roger and his parents at a restaurant and stamping ground. Despite her mom's offer to lend her car, Ashley opted to drive herself, saying she wouldn't be gone long. As she departed, her mom remembered her final words, "I love you, Mom. I'll be back soon." That evening, Chris received a call from Roger, who couldn't meet with Ashley and had tried calling her but didn't get an answer. When Ashley didn't return home by 8 p.m. and didn't answer her mother's calls, Carol started to worry. She called Roger's mother and learned the meeting had been canceled, sparking a frantic search for Ashley. Chris and his father searched for her, eventually checking Scott County Park, one of Ashley's favorite places. Ashley often visited Scott County Park with her boyfriend Roger, and later she would feed the ducks there on her own. The park is about 10 miles from Stamping Ground. One day, Chris and his father were driving around the park when they saw a car that looked like Ashley's. As they got closer, they realized it was indeed her car, with the engine running and the lights on. When they approached the car, Chris saw that the driver's side window was down, and Ashley was sitting inside with her head down. She was wearing a seatbelt but was unresponsive. Chris opened the door, shook her, and hoped she was just sleeping. But when he looked at his hand, he saw blood. He immediately called 911. Sadly, by the time Chris called for help, Ashley had already passed away, and the doctors couldn't save her. The devastating news soon reached Ashley's mom, who was overwhelmed with grief. The investigators arrived at the crime scene, and since Ashley's death was a result of a crime, her body remained in the car until the evidence was collected. At the scene, investigators found the car's engine running, the heater and radio on, and the driver's side window rolled down. A quick examination revealed the cause of Ashley's death. 3 9mm shell casings lay on the ground beside the car, and Ashley had sustained gunshot wounds to the head and neck. Despite a thorough search, the police were unable to find the murder weapon in the park. The unusual circumstances of the shooting suggested that Ashley was familiar with her killer. The fact that the window was down on a chilly night was suspicious, and the position of Ashley's body indicated that she had not attempted to defend herself or escape. From these clues, investigators concluded that Ashley knew her killer. The crime scene revealed that Ashley's wallet and phone were still in the car, leading investigators to quickly rule out robbery as a motive. The car's interior held a poignant clue: scattered ultrasound pictures, which Ashley had likely been looking at in the final moments of her life. At 5 months pregnant, Ashley's murder also claimed the life of her unborn son, Landon. This heinous crime was unprecedented in Scott County, and the community demanded that the police find the perpetrator. Ashley's parents told investigators she planned to meet Roger, the father of her unborn child, on the day she died. Roger was distraught, overwhelmed by emotion, and couldn't imagine who could harm his ex-girlfriend and their child. Investigators brought him in for further questioning. Roger told investigators he canceled a restaurant meeting with Ashley due to other meetings. He called her twice, but she didn't answer, so he called her home and asked Chris to have her call him back. Roger's account matched Chris's previous statement about Ashley's plans. Carol defended Roger, calling him a nice guy who got along with her family and not believe he'd harm Ashley and Landon. As investigators searched for clues, Ashley's family sought answers. Carol found her daughter's diary detailing daily life. One name stood out: Dina Williams, a classmate from a poor background, often wearing the same clothes. Initially, Ashley and Dina were friends, but their friendship deteriorated due to Dina's jealousy. Dina envied Ashley's possessions and relationships, including her romance with Roger. Ashley documented their multiple fights in her diary. Carol discovered this information from Ashley's diary and became suspicious of Dina's involvement in Ashley's death. After Ashley and Roger broke up, Dina quickly started dating Roger, which raised Carol's suspicions. Furthermore, Ashley's pregnancy with Roger's child might have motivated Dina to eliminate her as a rival for Roger's attention. Carol handed over the diary to the investigators, believing it held crucial evidence. The investigators also found Ashley's descriptions of her tumultuous relationship with Dina to be revealing. As a result, Dina was brought in for questioning at the police station, where she denied any role in Ashley's death. Dina, who worked at a bank, told investigators that she had an alibi for the evening of the crime. She was at an office party. Although she openly expressed her dislike for Ashley, especially because of her pregnancy, the lack of sentiment towards Ashley's death wasn't enough to detain her, so she was let go. The ballistic examination results revealed that the shooter was likely around 5 feet 10 inches tall. Since Dina was only 5 feet 5 inches tall, it seemed unlikely that she was the perpetrator. However, her twin brother Thomas, who matched the estimated height, had previously inquired about inducing a miscarriage, according to rumors. Moreover, people claimed that Thomas would do anything his sister asked. The investigators questioned Thomas, but he denied any involvement, and without evidence, they had no choice but to release him. Investigators' search for clues continued as Ashley's family prepared for the funeral, grappling with the unimaginable pain of losing 2 loved ones. During the autopsy, the fetus was removed from Ashley's body. Ashley and Landon were laid to rest together, a heart-wrenching gesture. The fact that the perpetrator remained at large added to the family's devastation. Ashley's parents offered a $3,000 reward, later increased to $5,000, for any information that could help catch their daughter's killer. This led to a flood of calls from people who thought they might have helpful information. One call in particular stood out. A woman who lived near the park where Ashley was shot reported that she might have seen the perpetrator. She described seeing someone running out of the park, jumping over a fence, and then getting into a red Chevrolet pickup truck that was waiting with its engine running. The truck sped away soon after. This crucial eyewitness account suggested that there might be more than one person involved in Ashley's murder, and that investigators should be looking for at least 2 suspects. The discovery of the red pickup truck led everyone who knew Ashley to suspect Roger, since he owned a similar vehicle. The police promptly took Roger's truck into custody and conducted a thorough search, but unfortunately, they found no incriminating evidence inside. The investigators decided to re-interview Dina and her brother Thomas. They started by questioning Thomas, who initially denied any involvement. However, after learning that a witness had placed Roger's pickup truck at the crime scene, Thomas became more cooperative. When asked if he knew who killed Ashley, he quickly replied that it was Roger McBe. Thomas eventually made a deal with the investigators, trading his cooperation for a lighter sentence. He confessed to providing the gun to Roger, who then used it to shoot Ashley. Thomas also revealed that Roger had disposed of the weapon in Elorn Creek. After an extensive 6-hour dive search, the police finally found the gun, which was later confirmed through ballistics testing to be the murder weapon. The investigators initially suspected Dina of being the shooter, but they soon ruled her out due to a discrepancy in height. However, during further questioning, Dina revealed that she was the getaway driver on the night of the crime. This led to the arrests of Roger McBe, Dina Williams, and her twin brother Thomas. It was clear that Roger was motivated by his desire to avoid becoming a father. Ashley, on the other hand, was excited to become a mother and had the full support of her family. Roger devised a sinister plan to eliminate the problem. He lured Ashley to Scott County Park under the pretense of a meeting with his parents at a nearby restaurant. Dina drove him to the park, where he approached Ashley's car with a gun. As Ashley rolled down her window to show him ultrasound pictures, Roger shot her 3 times, killing her and their unborn child. He then fled the scene in the pickup truck, escaping with Dina's help. The perpetrators stopped and got rid of the gun by throwing it into the river. Roger McBe denied any involvement. Thomas Dina, on the other hand, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in the crime. As part of his plea deal, Dina admitted to accepting $11,000 from Roger to harm Ashley and cause her to have a miscarriage. Although the plan was never carried out, Dina agreed to give Roger the gun used in the murder, according to court records. In 2005, Dina Williams pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal. The prosecutors recommended that she serve a total of 20 years in prison, making her eligible for parole after serving 17 years of her sentence. Prosecutors plan to call witnesses who would testify that Dina wanted Ashley dead, conspired with Roger to poison her, and even offered $1,000 to cause a miscarriage. When these plans failed, they turned to more extreme measures. Dina claimed her public defender warned her she'd likely be found guilty. She was distressed, saying she pleaded guilty to something she didn't do. Dina admitted driving Roger to the park, but said she drove around the subdivision while they met and later returned to pick him up. During her drive, a woman heard 3 gunshots, but at the time, she didn't know what they were. Dina, who was involved in the events, stated that Roger had planned something without her knowledge. Later, he called Ashley on his phone, telling her he loved her and was sorry he missed meeting her at the park. The jury listened to a recording of this message during Roger's trial. According to Dina, when she left the park, Roger never mentioned that Ashley was dead. Dina also claimed that she didn't report the incident to the police because she was afraid of Roger, who she said was abusive towards her. Dina Williams said she was terrified of Roger, who threatened to kill her. She expressed regret and sympathy for the Ashley family. However, Roger's parents disputed her testimony, calling her a compulsive liar who acted impulsively. They accused Dina of being jealous of Ashley and taking a plea deal to avoid responsibility. Dina was sentenced to 20 years in prison, released on parole in 2021, and claimed she was young and influenced by Roger at the time of the crime, denying knowledge of his relationship with the victim. During her time in prison, Dina participated in various rehabilitation programs, including anger management, legal aid training, horticulture, and Braille transcription courses. Roger's initial murder conviction was overturned in 2009 by the Kentucky Supreme Court due to illegally obtained evidence. The court ruled that prosecutors had used evidence from an unauthorized jail informant who had engaged in casual conversations with Roger, hoping to elicit incriminating statements. The informant had exceeded his authorized role, leading to the conviction being overturned. Roger later pleaded guilty to being an accomplice to murder and tampering with evidence, and was sentenced to 42 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 16 years. He also received a concurrent 5-year sentence for evidence tampering. At his 2023 parole hearing, Roger expressed remorse for his actions, stating that he didn't deserve parole and was truly sorry for what he had done. He wanted to apologize to the family of Ashley Lyons, the mother of his child, whom he had loved deeply. Although he acknowledged his daily regret, his parole eligibility was declined and the hearing was discontinued. Roger remains in prison. In memory of Ashley, an angel garden with ceramic angel statues has been created at Scott County Park, where she tragically died. After Ashley's death, Carol and her husband Buford Lyons worked to pass a law that recognizes violence against a pregnant woman as 2 separate crimes, one against the woman herself and another against her unborn child. This law was passed at both the state and federal levels. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Patrick De La Cerda. Patrick De La Cerda was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, to a loving family. His father, Max De La Cerda, was from Spain and his mother, Patricia Ronza, was from France and moved to the US in the 1980s, where she married Max and had Patrick. Patrick grew up in a supportive and caring environment, surrounded by his parents' kindness, mutual respect, and care. He was a bright, sociable, and friendly person who excelled in school and made friends easily. His parents prioritized his education and upbringing, providing him with every opportunity to become a worthy individual. Patrick's father was a skilled construction specialist who had worked in the field all his life. Although the family wasn't wealthy, they were considered well off by city standards. After high school, Patrick decided to follow in his father's footsteps by enrolling in the construction faculty. However, during his university years, his parents divorced after nearly 25 years of marriage. The divorce was amicable, with no conflicts or disputes over property. Patrick's mother moved to Deltona, where she remarried, while Patrick chose to stay with his father in Miami, where they worked together as respected professionals in the construction industry. Despite their divorce, the family remained extremely close-knit and supportive. They regularly kept in touch through phone calls and were always willing to help each other when needed. Patrick frequently visited his mother in Deltona, sharing his life updates, happiness, and experiences, and introducing her to his love interests. With his mixed French-Spanish heritage, Patrick had a charming appearance from a young age, making him popular among they. However, having grown up in a family that valued strong relationships, he never pursued casual flings, instead seeking true mutual love and a strong, loving family of his own. Patrick met Jessica on a popular dating site in June 2017. Although he wasn't sure he'd find someone special, he was drawn to her striking appearance and charming smile. Jessica, born in 1988 in Orlando, Florida, responded to his message, and they started communicating easily. She had studied banking at a local university and worked at a bank branch in Orlando. As they shared their thoughts and experiences, they quickly developed mutual sympathy and trust. After exchanging phone numbers, they talked for hours every evening for the next couple of weeks, building a strong connection. The young people, Patrick and Jessica, decided to meet in person after connecting online. Because they lived in different parts of the state, they chose a midpoint for their meeting. On their first date, Patrick was immediately smitten with Jessica and knew he wanted to be with her. Jessica also felt a strong connection, although she was slightly taken aback by their 4-year age difference. Thrilled, Patrick called his mom, Patricia, on the way home to tell her about the girl he wanted to marry and start a family with. Patricia could hear the excitement in her son's voice and knew he was serious, making her happy for him. As their long-distance relationship continued for several months, the couple faced the challenge of living far apart, only able to see each other on weekends in neutral locations. To spend quality time together, they would often rent a cozy hotel room in a secluded spot. They cherished these moments, but by Sunday evening, they would reluctantly part ways, returning to their respective homes to prepare for work on Monday morning. In December 2017, Patrick moved to Delton to be closer to his girlfriend Jessica, who lived nearby. He purchased a house in a quiet neighborhood and started renovating it to create a cozy home for when Jessica would join him. However, Jessica was unable to leave her job immediately, so they planned to have a housewarming party in early spring the following year. As the new year approached, Patrick decided to propose to Jessica. He set up a romantic surprise, arranging fireworks in the backyard of his new house. While Jessica was distracted by the display, Patrick got down on one knee and presented her with a ring, asking her to be his wife. Overjoyed, Jessica accepted his proposal. Patrick revealed that he had been searching for the perfect engagement ring for a long time, but couldn't find one that met his high standards. He settled for a decent ring from a jewelry store to propose before the new year, but he had already commissioned a custom-made ring from a jewelry workshop, designed specifically to his taste. Patrick's life was about to take a dramatic turn. It had been 2 months since he got engaged, and wedding and housewarming preparations were in full swing. Both sets of parents had given their blessing, and the happy couple was ecstatic about their future together. They were planning a grand celebration in either Miami or France, the groom's mother's hometown. But on February 27, 2018, concern set in when Max, Patrick's father, received a call from a courier. The delivery company had listed Max's number as an alternate contact. The courier reported that Patrick's order had been delivered to his address, but he wasn't answering the door or his phone. This wasn't like Patrick, and Max immediately felt worried. Since he was at work and couldn't check on his son, he decided to ask his future daughter-in-law for help. Patrick's father called Jessica, his voice laced with anxiety, saying he couldn't reach his son. Jessica had been trying to contact Patrick all morning, but he hadn't replied to her messages or calls. When she told Patrick's father, Max, he feared something must have happened to him. Jessica rushed to Patrick's house as quickly as possible. When she arrived, she saw his car in the driveway, suggesting he hadn't left. Using her own key, she entered the yard and loudly called out to Patrick, but there was no response. Jessica cautiously opened the front door and was met with a horrific scene. Her fiancé lay at the entrance, surrounded by a pool of his own blood, showing no signs of life. She immediately called emergency services, but the paramedics who arrived were unable to help Patrick and sadly declared him dead. By the time the police arrived, Jessica was devastated, sobbing in the backyard of the house where Patrick had proposed to her just 2 months prior. When an officer approached her, she pointed an accusatory finger at a single individual, a wealthy and influential ex-boyfriend. According to Jessica, he was responsible for murdering her lover and destroying her life. To make sense of this complex case, it's essential to go back in time to when Jessica and Patrick first met. At that point, Jessica was in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a successful businessman who owned an investment fund. He was 20 years older than her and had swept her off her feet during her student years. Gregory lavished her with expensive gifts and exotic getaways, and Jessica believed she had found her soulmate. However, she soon began to notice peculiarities in his behavior that raised red flags. Gregory exerted control over his girlfriend Jessica, monitoring her every move and conversation. If she had a male admirer, he would threaten and intimidate them away. Meanwhile, he was secretive about his own life, sharing little information with her. Their 8-year relationship was marked by Gregory's refusal to introduce Jessica to his family and friends. He dictated when they would spend time together, go on vacation, or visit his home, claiming to be too busy. Jessica longed for a normal family life, including having children, but Gregory always put it off, saying the time was not right. When Jessica attempted to end the relationship, Gregory proposed to her, and she accepted. However, nothing changed. They still lived apart and only saw each other when Gregory permitted. After Gregory was in a car accident and hospitalized, Jessica rushed to his side, but first she stopped by his house to gather some belongings for him. Jessica encountered a mysterious woman at the house who refused to introduce herself and instead asked Jessica who she was. Jessica explained that she was the bride of the house's owner, showing her engagement ring as proof. The stranger then revealed her own ring and introduced herself as Diora Sanchez, Bender's legal wife. Stunned, Jessica decided to end her relationship with the cheating businessman. However, Gregory begged her to stay, promising to divorce Diora soon and marry Jessica instead. Naively, Jessica believed him, but time passed and nothing changed. Frustrated, she joined a dating site and met Patrick, with whom she started communicating. Finally, Jessica mustered the courage to break up with Gregory, but he refused to let her go. Bender initially tried to win Jessica back by promising to divorce his wife, but when that failed, he resorted to threats and harassment. When that didn't work, he became suspicious and decided to find out who Jessica was communicating with. He hired professionals to hack into her account and gather information. After discovering that Jessica was talking to Patrick, Gregory sent him threatening messages, claiming Jessica was his fiancée and demanding that he break up with her. While Patrick remained calm, believing the threats were empty, Jessica was terrified. She knew Bender had the means to carry out his threats, given his wealth, connections, and large collection of firearms. Jessica suggested ending their relationship to avoid hurting anyone, but Patrick refused to consider it. Instead, they went to the police and presented evidence of Gregory Bender's stalking and threats. As a result, they obtained a restraining order prohibiting Gregory from approaching or contacting them in any way. Additionally, the court ordered him to surrender all firearms in his possession. For a period of time, things seemed to return to normal, and the couple, Jessica and Patrick, thought they had finally escaped the stalker's attention. However, Jessica remained uneasy and persuaded Patrick to install security cameras both outside and inside their home, fearing that Gregory might ignore the restraining order. Let's go back to the tragic events of February 27, 2018. During the initial crime scene investigation, detectives quickly dismissed the possibility of a robbery and instead suspected a personal motive, given the brutality of the murder. The killer seemingly had a deep hatred for the victim. The 25-year-old victim's body had 4 gunshot wounds, including shots to the thigh, chest, and head. The examination also revealed injuries consistent with a fall from a ladder. The body was found lying on the floor between the front door and the stairs leading to the second floor. The killer likely sneaked into the house and waited for Patrick on the second floor. When Patrick climbed the stairs, the intruder ambushed him, shooting him in the thigh. Patrick fell down the stairs, and the killer followed, shooting him again in the chest and then delivering 2 fatal headshots. The murder weapon, a rare and hard-to-get pistol, was never found. However, investigators discovered 3 shell casings, 1 on the second floor and 2 more downstairs. The 4th shell casing was missing, suggesting the killer took it as a souvenir. Jessica claimed to know the killer's identity, but the police initially suspected Patrick's neighbor, a U.S. Army veteran who had a history of conflict with the victim. The neighbor had been wounded and concussed in combat, which led to a mental disorder. The veteran was skilled with firearms and had access to rare guns. In December 2017, he mistakenly shot at his new neighbor, thinking he was a burglar. Fortunately, no one was physically harmed, but the neighbor was hospitalized for a psychiatric condition that worsened due to the incident. After his return, the neighbor stalked Patrick, accusing him of being a spy and threatening to expose him. Given the neighbor's mental illness and potential motive, he was detained and questioned. Although he openly disliked Patrick, he had a solid alibi confirmed by multiple people at the time of the murder. The investigation focused on finding evidence and provoking a reaction from the perpetrator. The initial theory of a robbery was quickly dismissed since nothing was stolen or disturbed in the house, except for the hard drives containing video surveillance footage. This made it impossible to identify who entered or left the house that day. Forensic experts found no evidence, including fingerprints, shoe prints, or DNA traces, at the crime scene. The murder was meticulously planned, and although the investigators were convinced of Gregory's guilt, he seemed likely to get away with it. To catch him, the police devised a covert plan, asking Jessica to lure her former lover into a frank conversation. Jessica agreed and called Gregory, yelling at him, crying, and demanding to know why he had committed the crime. However, Gregory was suspicious from the start and feigned innocence, pretending to be shocked when Jessica accused him of murdering her fiancé. He even expressed condolences to her, never cracking under pressure. The police were unable to provoke him into a confession or a false move, and without sufficient evidence, they could only ask him to testify, but not detain or question him. Gregory had honored the restraining order and seemed to have moved on from his past with Jessica. Daura Sanchez Bender contacted the police with crucial information about the Patrick de la Cerda case. She had seen a suspicious notebook in her husband's office with a detailed plan of an unknown person's house and a strange algorithm of actions. Although she didn't think much of it at the time, She connected it to the crime after seeing a news report. The police searched her husband's office and found the notebook, but the relevant pages were missing. However, they were discovered in the trash can, where Gregory had carelessly discarded them. The pages contained a detailed plan of the crime, including instructions to avoid leaving traces. The records showed that Gregory had been stalking Patrick, knew his daily routine, and was aware of the surveillance cameras. Gregory tried to cover his tracks by disposing of evidence, but he made critical mistakes, including failing to destroy his records and underestimating his wife's curiosity. A fourth missing shell casing was found in a cigar box, confirmed to be from the crime scene. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the prosecution had enough circumstantial evidence to warrant Gregory's arrest. At the trial, Jessica testified about her tumultuous relationship with Gregory, including harassment and threats. However, the defense strategy focused on deflecting blame onto Jessica, accusing her of provoking Gregory's actions and being motivated by material gain. The defense downplayed the evidence of a murder plan, suggesting it was just a fantasy, and argued that the search of Gregory's home was illegal and the shell casing could have been planted. They also questioned the identification of the gun model by Jessica. During a court session, the defendant Gregory Bender's ex-wife, Dora Sanchez, testified as a witness. Until then, Gregory had shown little emotion, but he suddenly became animated and unexpectedly declared his love for Dora. This surprising confession seemed to influence Dora's testimony, and she began to question her initial statements. Despite her earlier claims, Dora said she was forgetful and eventually claimed that, having lived with Gregory for many years, she couldn't believe he was capable of murder. However, despite the lack of direct evidence and the defense team's efforts to challenge the search of Gregory's home, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. The judge sentenced Gregory to life imprisonment without parole. As the sentence was read, Gregory fixed an intense stare on Jessica, his eyes unblinking, and seemed to glare at her. This made Jessica feel ill and brought her close to a panic attack. Jessica Devani sat beside her late fiancé's mother, overwhelmed with emotion, sobbing, and choking back tears. Despite numerous appeals by Gregory and his legal team, all attempts to overturn the verdict were rejected. The public was fascinated by the case due to its shocking nature. A wealthy businessman brutally murdered a working-class man and tried to escape justice. Patrick de la Cerda's story has been widely reported, with Gregory currently in prison. Jessica finds comfort in keeping Patrick's memory alive and feels safe. She wears the ring he gave her and a special piece of jewelry he had intended to give her. She remains close to Patrick's parents, who have welcomed her into their family as if she were their own daughter. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jackie Vandergriff. Jacqueline "Jackie" Vandergriff was born on March 4, 1992, in Carrollton, Texas. As the youngest of two daughters, she grew up in the colony, Frisco, Texas, surrounded by a loving family. From a young age, Jackie exhibited a natural talent for gymnastics. Before she could walk, she was already somersaulting, and her parents recognized her potential at just 3 years old. They enrolled her in gymnastics courses, and over the following years, she refined her skills and enthusiastically participated in various competitions. She eventually reached level 5 in the Texas State Gymnastics Association. Those who knew Jackie characterized her as a warm and compassionate person with a heart of gold. She genuinely cared about the well-being of others and was a loyal friend who inspired her loved ones to be the best versions of themselves. The comfort and joy she brought to those around her were palpable. Her kindness extended beyond human relationships, as she had a deep love for animals, was a lifelong vegetarian, and believed in supporting pet adoption from no-kill shelters. Jackie's passion for reading was unmatched, with the Harry Potter series ranking high on her list of favorites. Immersing herself in the magical world of Hogwarts was a regular escape for her. Besides reading, Jackie had a deep affection for music, boasting an eclectic taste that spanned from Pink to James Taylor and Rob Thomas. Her love for musicals was particularly strong, with Rent being a favorite she would attend every local performance of. After graduating from Wakeland High School in Frisco, Jackie went on to pursue a career in cosmetology at the Paul Mitchell School. She successfully completed her training and earned her license as an esthetician. Not one to rest on her laurels, Jackie opted to further her education at Texas Woman's University, where she majored in nutrition and food science. She firmly believed that good nutrition was essential and advocated for everyone's access to proper nourishment. Her ultimate vision was to educate others about the significance of healthy eating, empowering them to make informed choices. Jackie Vandergriff seemed destined for greatness, a college junior on track to achieve her dreams and make a positive impact on the world. However, a chance encounter with an evil person in the summer of 2016 would devastate her life forever. On Wednesday, September 14, 2016, shortly after dawn, a Grapevine Police Department officer in Grapevine, Texas, received a distressing call. The caller reported finding a body near Grapevine Lake. When the officer arrived at the scene, they found a scorched area with a plastic blue kiddie pool containing a badly burned body. The body was charred beyond recognition, making it impossible to determine its identity, age, or gender. The badly burned remains of a body were taken to the medical examiner's office, where fingerprint identification later confirmed that they belonged to 24-year-old Jackie Vandergriff. As detectives investigated Jackie's final hours, they discovered that she was last seen in Denton, near the college, where she had visited two bars, Fry Street Public House and Shots and Crafts. The autopsy conducted by the medical examiner revealed the shocking extent of Jackie's injuries. She had been killed, dismembered, decapitated, and set on fire. Most disturbingly, her killer had removed her heart. As news of Jackie's brutal murder spread throughout Denton, detectives began receiving tips from people claiming to have seen a suspicious man near the crime scene, where a fire had been set. The detectives eventually obtained CCTV footage from the two bars Jackie had visited around the time of her death. At 7 p.m., a man entered the Fry Street Public House, where he sat at the bar and had a drink. An hour later, Jackie arrived and struck up a conversation with the bartender and the man. Security footage captured their interaction, providing valuable clues about their possible connection. After spending about 45 minutes at the Fry Street Public House, Jackie posted a tweet at around 8:45 p.m., saying she was glad she decided to get off Tinder and walk to a bar. Shortly after, Jackie and the man left the bar together and headed to Shots and Crafts, where they joined a group of women around 9:45 p.m. The pair left Shots and Crafts together. The detectives used CCTV footage to track Jackie and the man she was with, following their journey to the convenience store where the man had parked his car. Jackie was seen getting into the car, and at that point, everything seemed fine. However, this was the last time Jackie was seen alive before her murder. The detectives interviewed the bartender at the Fry Street Public House, where Jackie had gone to apply for a job. The bartender remembered Jackie having a friendly conversation with him and a male customer, but he had no information about what happened to Jackie and the man after they left. The detectives also reviewed security footage from Shots and Crafts, where Jackie was seen with the man and a group of women. One of the women remembered receiving a business card from the man, who was a personal trainer. She had exchanged contact information with him because she was interested in fitness. Although this detail seemed insignificant at first, it would later prove to be a crucial discovery in the investigation. To their amazement, the woman still had the card in her hand and was more than willing to share the information with the investigators. On the card, they found the name Charles Bryant. By that time, the detectives had already obtained footage from Walmart, taken at 4 a.m., which clearly showed Charles buying a shovel. The detectives then conducted a thorough investigation to uncover the true identity of Charles Bryant, who was the last person seen with Jackie before her murder. Their discoveries proved to be deeply unsettling. Charles Bryant, a 29-year-old man, lived about 20 miles away from Denton, but for some reason, the city held a strong attraction for him. What was drawing him to Denton was a desperate attempt to rekindle his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, who was a resident of Grapevine and a student at the University of North Texas. In May 2016, Caitlin graduated from high school and met Charles Bryant at the restaurant where she worked in Grapevine, Texas. Charles, a personal trainer and bartender in his late 20s, stood out from the boys Caitlin knew from school. His tattoos showcased his muscular build, and Caitlin found his unique skills and mysterious nature intriguing. That summer, Caitlin and Charles spent most days together at Grapevine Lake, and their attraction grew stronger daily. While Caitlin was captivated by Charles, her mother grew concerned about their significant age gap and worried about her daughter's well-being. Caitlin's mother asked to see a picture of Charles, and initially, she was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. However, when she looked into his piercing eyes, she felt an instant sense of unease. It was as if she was staring directly at evil. As her concern for her daughter's well-being grew, she voiced her worries to Caitlin, urging her to reconsider the relationship. But Caitlin dismissed her mother's warnings, insisting that Charles was nice to her, unaware of the sinister nature lurking beneath his charming facade. At first, Caitlin was happy with her new boyfriend, but as time passed, doubts began to creep in. She started questioning whether her mother had been right. Charles seemed overly self-absorbed and manipulative, and Caitlin couldn't shake the feeling that he had an inflated sense of self-importance. He would constantly remind her that she could never find anyone better than him, making her feel bad about herself. By mid-August 2016, Caitlin was preparing to leave for college in Denton, and she had decided to end her relationship with Charles due to the numerous red flags she had noticed. However, Charles showed up at her home the next day, pleading with her to give him another chance and promising to change. Caitlin was persuaded, and they got back together. Only a week later, Caitlin moved to Denton to start her freshman year at college. After settling in, she finally broke up with Charles for good. Charles, however, refused to accept the breakup. On August 24th, the police found Charles on the University of North Texas campus during a traffic stop. They initially suspected him of driving under the influence, but his blood alcohol level was within the legal limit. Instead, he was arrested on several outstanding warrants and subsequently released. Charles returned to the University of North Texas several hours later and knocked on Caitlin's dorm room door, which he had surprisingly tracked down. When Caitlin answered, she immediately called 911, and by the time the officer arrived, Charles had already disappeared. The officer questioned Caitlin, who explained that she had ended their relationship due to Charles' abusive behavior and the way he spoke to her. As a result, the officer issued Charles a temporary no-trespass order, prohibiting him from entering the UNT campus. Despite this, Charles was undeterred and determined to find ways to reach Caitlin, despite the restrictions. On August 31st, Charles coincidentally encountered Caitlin on her first day at a new job. Recognizing him, Caitlin asked Charles to leave. She then scheduled a meeting with her manager to discuss the situation and request that Charles be barred from entering the business premises. However, the manager regretfully informed Caitlin that he lacked the authority to grant her request. This incident ultimately forced Caitlin to quit her job. Despite her best efforts to avoid him, Charles was more determined than ever to confront Caitlin. He was hell-bent on exacting revenge and causing her even more harm. The vicious cycle of fear and intimidation continued, driven by Charles's all-consuming obsession, putting Caitlin's life in constant danger. Meanwhile, Caitlin's decision to stay on campus at the University of North Texas worried her mother sick. Her mother begged her to return home, where they could keep her safe, but Caitlin was adamant that she was safe in her dorm room. She felt secure within the university's walls. On September 6th, a terrifying incident shook Caitlin to her core when Charles suddenly showed up at her dorm on campus. As he pounded on her door, Caitlin's worst fears took over, and she hid in her roommate's closet. From her hiding place, she could hear Charles coaxing her to come out, claiming he had something for her. Her darkest fears began to materialize, and her mind raced with frightening scenarios of what Charles might have planned for her. Caitlin was terrified for her life, so she made a quick decision and called 111 from inside the closet, speaking in a whisper because she was afraid Charles could hear her. The dispatcher asked her to speak up several times, but Caitlin was too scared to talk clearly. No matter how hard the dispatcher tried, Caitlin's voice was barely loud enough to be heard because she was so frightened. The police arrived soon, but Charles had already run away. However, he left a creepy reminder that he had been there, flowers, and a 2-page handwritten letter addressed to Caitlin. The letter had disturbing messages that made the young woman even more afraid. Just a few minutes after the incident, the police caught Charles outside the campus, dressed in exercise clothes, as if he had been jogging. As a student, he was arrested for trespassing and released on bail a few hours later. Despite Caitlin's efforts to cut off all contact with Charles by blocking him on her phone, email, and social media, he kept finding new ways to reach her. Charles created multiple accounts to make sure he could still communicate with her. Recognizing that Charles's behavior had become increasingly threatening, the police intervened to help Caitlin obtain a protective court order. The very next day, she formally filed a petition for the order, which granted her legal protection against further harassment. However, despite his first arrest, Charles continued to attempt to contact Caitlin. These unwanted communications led to his second arrest for stalking, as he repeatedly violated the terms of the protective order. It was his third arrest within 2 weeks of his second arrest. Charles posted a $5,000 bond and was released from custody while out on bail. Charles Bryant went to Fry Street, a location where Caitlin frequently spent time. Although there was only circumstantial evidence, detectives were certain that Charles had met Jackie Vander Griff there, possibly linking him to Jackie's murder. However, no physical evidence existed. When the detectives assisting Caitlin with her stalking case at UNT learned that Charles was the prime suspect in a murder, they grew concerned for Caitlin's safety. Caitlin claimed she was okay, but in the days following Jackie's murder, Charles sent her numerous photos, texts, and emails. On September 18th, the police took Charles into custody for violating Caitlin's protective order. During his incarceration, detectives hoped to uncover more evidence linking Charles to Jackie's murder. While being interrogated, Charles was shown a picture of Jackie and claimed to have seen her at the bar, but denied knowing anything about her. Concurrently, a search warrant was executed at Charles's residence. The search yielded a large military-style knife and a Texas Woman's University purse, which was identified as Jackie's school purse. Additionally, the search team found a kiddie pool that had gone missing from Charles's backyard, matching the one where Jackie's body was discovered. The detectives sought the expertise of a seasoned professional who had worked with prolific killers, including the Texas Rangers. This expert was knowledgeable about the mentalities of individuals like Charles, aware that they often have a strong urge to discuss their crimes. When the interview started, Charles claimed to have no memory of Jackie. However, the expert suspected he was hiding something. The expert thought Charles knew more about Jackie's fate than he was letting on. To build trust, the expert created a relaxed atmosphere, making the conversation feel like a casual chat between friends at a bar. The expert suggested possible scenarios, trying to see if Charles would react or take the bait. They portrayed Jackie as the one who had led Charles on, causing frustration. Throughout the conversation, the expert used different tactics to gauge Charles's reactions. However, this approach was risky. If the expert pushed too hard or seemed insincere, they might lose Charles's trust and harm the investigation. So, the expert had to find a balance, staying friendly while trying to get Charles to reveal the truth. During an interview, an expert closely watched Charles's responses and body language to gain insight into his character. The expert pretended to help Charles recall the events surrounding Jackie's admission, but in reality was conducting a brief memory test. To the expert's surprise, Charles' story changed slightly during the test. At first, Charles claimed he knew nothing about Jackie's admission, but later revealed that he had spoken to her at the Fry Street public house when she applied for a job. As the conversation continued, the expert decided to take a different approach. They ordered pizza, hoping the food would help Charles relax, and the detectives could uncover the motive behind Jackie's murder. The detectives suspected that Charles' uncontrollable rage towards his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, was the catalyst behind Jackie's death. The interrogation lasted around 3 hours, during which Charles admitted to unintentionally killing Jackie during what he called kinky sex. He claimed the incident occurred in his car, and Jackie had asked him to choke her with an oversized zip tie he had. However, Charles maintained that the death was an accident. When Charles Bryant was accused of murdering Jackie Vag Riff, his ex-girlfriend Caitlin went on social media to look at Jackie's Facebook page, only to discover they were already friends. It suddenly came to Caitlin's mind that she had received a friend request from Jackie's Facebook page on the very day Jackie's body was found. Before Caitlin was even aware of the case, she was convinced that her ex-boyfriend Charlie, who was the suspect in Jackie's murder, must have used Jackie's phone to send her the friend request. Additionally, the police also believed that a tweet sent from Jackie's account after her death, which read, "Never knew I could feel like this," was actually sent by Charles after he murdered her. Christy was shocked when she learned that Charles, a man she had met on a dating app a year earlier, was facing a murder charge. To her, Charles was a quiet and reserved person. But during their brief time together, she noticed some disturbing signs that raised her concerns. Christy said that Charles quickly became clingy and attached to her, which eventually led her to end their relationship. But Charles persisted in pursuing her, going so far as to profess his desperate love for her. This declaration caught Christy off guard, especially since they had never even shared a kiss. Christy's experience working with abused children gave her a unique insight that helped her identify certain patterns in Charles's behavior. This led her to suspect that he might have been a victim of childhood abuse, a pattern she had seen in some of the young clients she worked with. One day, Christy found the courage to ask Charles directly if he had been abused as a child. To her surprise, Charles confessed that he had indeed suffered trauma in his childhood. Although the police couldn't verify Charles's claims, Christy believed him. She maintained contact with him, albeit from a distance, because she felt sympathy for him and didn't think he was capable of murder. The autopsy of Jackie's body failed to provide clear answers about her cause of death and where she was killed before being dismembered and set on fire. The lack of insight from the autopsy results raised concerns for the prosecution, leaving key questions unanswered about the circumstances surrounding Jackie's death. Charles admitted to disposing of Jackie's body, claiming she had died accidentally during rough intercourse. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty to her murder. Caitlin, Charles's ex-girlfriend, was called to testify by the prosecution to share her experiences with his stalking behavior and violent tendencies. The goal was to establish a connection between his anger towards Caitlin and the eventual murder of Jackie, who bore a striking resemblance to Caitlin. When Caitlin took the stand, she was visibly uncomfortable and reluctantly identified Charles, commenting that he had a smirk. Overcome with emotion, she left the courtroom in tears. The judge ultimately ruled that Caitlin would not be allowed to share details of her relationship with Charles or their breakup with the jury. In April 2018, a year and a half after Jackie's tragic death, Charles Bryant went on trial for her murder. However, Jackie's best friend was too traumatized to attend the trial, finding it unbearable to face Charles in person. The thought of confronting him was a painful reminder of the devastation he had caused to their lives. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jonathan Hoffman. Jonathan Hoffman was born in Michigan in 1994 to Jennifer and Michael Hoffman. His sister Jessica was born 3 years later, and from a very young age, the two siblings formed an unbreakable bond and shared a special connection that would last a lifetime. However, Jonathan's parents, Jennifer and Michael, faced significant struggles in their marriage, and their frequent fights often forced them to leave Jonathan and Jessica in the care of their grandmother, Sandra. Sandra, Jennifer's mother, played a crucial role in the lives of her grandchildren, providing a safe, loving, and nurturing environment for them. The children cherished the time they spent with their grandmother, who offered them a sense of stability in an otherwise tumultuous upbringing. In 2008, after years of turmoil, Jennifer and Michael divorced when Jonathan was a senior at Farmington Central High School. Following the divorce, Jennifer made the difficult decision to relocate the family from Michigan to Arizona. This move was particularly hard for Jonathan, who was forced to leave behind the only life he had ever known, including his friends, familiar surroundings, and the comfort of his childhood home. The situation rapidly deteriorated for Jonathan and his family after they moved to Arizona. Not long after their relocation, his younger sister Jessica fell critically ill. Medical tests revealed a tumor in her brain, prompting urgent surgery to remove it the very next day. Although the operation was a success, it entailed a lengthy convalescence, and Jessica spent an entire month recovering in the hospital. Throughout this period, Jennifer dedicated herself fully to her daughter's recovery, neglecting her own needs in the process. This left Jonathan feeling abandoned and lonely, forced to navigate the challenges of adolescence in a new state without the emotional support of his mother and sister. Recognizing the strain Jonathan was under, his grandmother Sandra reached out to Jennifer, deeply concerned about her grandson's well-being. Believing familiar surroundings and old friends would bring Jonathan solace, Sandra suggested he return to Michigan to live with her and her husband Fred. Jennifer worried whether her 74-year-old mother would be capable of caring for him, but Sandra reassured her that she was more than capable. 1 month after the Hoffman family's move to Arizona, Jonathan returned to Michigan and moved in with Sandra and Fred. The homecoming brought Jonathan immense joy and relief midway through his senior year of high school. Thrilled to be back among friends and family, he felt a sense of comfort and belonging he had missed in Arizona. His friends recall that Jonathan was initially shy, but once he opened up, he was a lot of fun and loved to make people laugh. With a zest for adventure, he was always up for trying new things. Although Jennifer deeply missed her son, she embarked on the journey to Michigan to spend 2 weeks with him. During her visit, she was dismayed to discover that Jonathan had been smoking marijuana. However, Jennifer viewed this as a typical phase of teenage experimentation and was confident it didn't involve harder substances. With a heavy heart, Jennifer bid farewell to Jonathan, confident that he would be in good hands with his grandmother. But little did she know, Jonathan was in grave peril, and it was at the hands of his grandmother, Sandra. On May 19, 2017, at 5:27 p.m., Jonathan Hoffman made a frantic 911 call, his voice trembling as he relayed to the dispatcher that his grandmother had shot him and he was dying. The dispatcher sprang into action, swiftly dispatching police and paramedics to Jonathan's residence. As she spoke to him, she tried to reassure him that help was on the way, her voice steady amidst the chaos and fear in his. Suddenly, an ominous silence fell on the line, and for a moment, the dispatcher feared the connection had been dropped, or worse, that Jonathan had succumbed to his injuries. But then, just as her heart sank, she heard a barrage of gunfire erupt from the phone, followed by a pained cry. Jonathan yelled, "Ow!" as his voice cracked with terror, telling the operator that his grandmother had shot him again. The West Bloomfield Township Police Department officers responded swiftly to the scene, arriving at Sandra Lane's house at 5:33 p.m. As they approached, the sound of gunfire echoed from within the residence. Trained to handle such situations, the officers didn't hesitate, taking necessary precautions to ensure their safety. They positioned themselves behind their patrol vehicles, using them as cover from their vantage point. Observing a woman moving inside the house, they issued clear, direct commands, ordering the individual to put their weapon on the ground. After a tense moment, the officers heard the sound of a gun being secured, and with the assurance that the person inside had put the firearm away, they entered the residence. When the police made it inside the home, they found 74-year-old Sandra Lane standing before them, a Glock 17 .40 caliber handgun at her feet. Sandra repeated several times in an eerily calm tone that she had murdered her grandson, stating the disturbing sentiment as fact. One of the police officers asked Sandra why she had killed her grandson, but she remained silent, offering no explanation. 2 minutes after the police arrived, Sandra was handcuffed and placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. Officers entered her home to find the victim, whom Sandra claimed was her grandson, 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman. Inside the home, the air was thick with smoke, making it difficult to see through the haze as they ascended the staircase. They reached the landing where Jonathan lay motionless, face down on the hardwood floor, dressed in gym shorts and socks. The young man's body was riddled with gunshot wounds to his upper torso. Despite the severity of his condition, the medics managed to detect a faint pulse. With urgency, Jonathan was rushed to Botsford Hospital, where a team of medical professionals worked tirelessly to stabilize his condition. However, their efforts ultimately proved futile, and after 30 minutes of intense medical intervention, he was pronounced dead. After the ambulance rushed Jonathan Hoffman to the hospital, police secured Sandra Lane's home as a crime scene. The 3-level residence was a labyrinth of violence and blood, with nearly every room telling a grim tale. Crime scene investigators arrived, meticulously combing the area for clues to unravel the shocking events. As they descended the basement staircase, they were struck by footprints in the blood-stained floor, crucial evidence carefully preserved. Deeper in the house, the team found 10 bullet casings scattered throughout, each one collected and analyzed. One investigator discovered a bullet hole in the drywall, and the search for more evidence led them to the second floor, where a gun case filled with ammunition was found. While gathering evidence, investigators took extra care to photograph Sandra, capturing her face, arms, and hands as she sat in the patrol car. Sandra became overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face. Amidst the chaos, Fred Lane, Sandra's husband, appeared outside the house with their dog, claiming to have been gone for an hour, a walk he took after Sandra asked him to. Fred was stunned to discover that his wife, Sandra Lane, had confessed to shooting and killing their grandson Jonathan after he was pronounced dead at the hospital. The police faced the daunting task of breaking the news to Jonathan's family that their beloved son had been murdered by his own grandmother. As detectives dug deeper into the case, they learned that Jonathan had been living in Michigan, separated from his parents and sister who resided in Arizona. When the detectives shared the devastating news with Jennifer, informing her that her mother had taken the life of her cherished son, she was left in a state of utter disbelief. It seemed unbelievable that someone who was supposed to love and care for their grandchildren could commit such an atrocity. The fact that Jonathan was his grandmother's favorite made the tragedy even more incomprehensible, leaving everyone wondering how he met his end at Sandra's hands. As the day drew to a close, around 7:30 p.m., the police decided to take Sandra Lane to the hospital for a health evaluation, given her advanced age. While waiting in the emergency room, Sandra maintained that Jonathan had never harmed her, describing him as a kind boy who never hurt anyone. After a medical assessment, the doctors cleared Sandra of any suspicious injuries. With this, the police decided to return her to the patrol car and take her to the police department for further questioning. On May 20th, after midnight, Sandra's attorney met her at the police station before she provided her official statement to the police. Seated alongside her attorney, Sandra sought legal counsel when the detectives eventually met with them. Sandra's story took a dramatic turn at the police station. Contradicting her initial statement at the hospital, where she had claimed her grandson was not involved, she now alleged that she and Jonathan had engaged in a heated altercation involving yelling and screaming. During this confrontation, Jonathan had kicked her in the stomach, leaving her fearing for her life. According to Sandra, Jonathan's behavior had become increasingly erratic and angry of late. He would come and go from her house at all hours, frequently bringing over people she didn't care for. Furthermore, Sandra had noticed that valuables had gone missing from her home, leading her to suspect that Jonathan or his friends might be involved in theft. Sandra also mentioned that her grandson had a history of run-ins with the law. Sandra stated that Jonathan was pulled over by an officer while driving, and cannabis was found in his car. However, this didn't deter him, and he was stopped again by an officer shortly after. This time, he was found to be in possession of Adderall. Sandra also recalled an incident where she had to call 911 due to Jonathan's aggressive behavior. During that episode, he was yelling obscene remarks at her. Despite this, when the police arrived, Sandra persuaded them not to arrest him. According to Sandra, she was compelled to buy a gun due to Jonathan's behavior. Sandra alleged that everything escalated on May 18th when she accompanied Jonathan to the probation department due to his non-compliance with his probation terms. After returning home, Sandra stated that Jonathan threatened to take her car, which led to him attacking her. Since there were no witnesses to Jonathan's shooting apart from Sandra, the detectives faced a significant challenge in verifying her account. Sandra claimed self-defense, prompting the detectives to conduct a thorough investigation into the incident. Their primary concern was ensuring they didn't wrongfully send a 74-year-old frail grandmother to prison for defending herself against a violent teenage boy. The detectives examined the photo taken by crime scene investigators immediately after Sandra confessed to shooting Jonathan. However, upon reviewing the evidence, they found no signs of violence on Sandra, not a single scratch, which would be expected if she had indeed been in a physical struggle. During her court arraignment, the judge ruled that Sandra should be held on bond while awaiting trial at the correctional facility. Paul Walton, the prosecutor on the case, believed the 911 call made by Jonathan clashed with Sandra's self-defense claim. Upon listening to the call, Walton noticed a significant 2-minute and 51-second silence before Sandra fired another shot at Jonathan. Based on his observations, it seemed clear that Jonathan was already severely injured and no longer posed an immediate threat to Sandra. However, Sandra's defense team presented a contrasting argument. They countered that Jonathan still posed a threat despite his injuries. The defense highlighted a portion of the 911 call where Sandra yells, "Let go," implying that Jonathan was still attacking his grandmother, even in his injured state. The defense argued that Sandra was simply an innocent and loving grandmother. They pointed to the end of the 911 call, where Sandra can be heard instructing her bleeding grandson to lie down and promising to get him water, as proof of her compassionate nature. According to the defense, these statements revealed Sandra's true character as a caring and empathetic woman. Prosecutor Walton was perplexed by Sandra in complete control of the household, allowing her to behave like a tyrant, prone to violent outbursts. Years later, when Sandra remarried Fred Lane, Jennifer witnessed a significant shift in her mother's behavior. Sandra expressed deep affection for Fred, believing him to be a stabilizing influence in their home. Initially, her controlling nature seemed to subside. However, after Jennifer gave birth to Jonathan, Sandra allegedly attempted to reassert her dominance. Jennifer claimed that her mother's obsession with the baby bordered on an unhealthy level, with Sandra becoming so fixated that Jennifer jokingly wondered if she wanted to kidnap the child. After Sandra was charged with murdering her grandson Jonathan, the community of West Bloomfield surprisingly rallied around her. A significant number of residents believed Jonathan was a drug user who got what was coming to him, sparking a wave of support for Sandra. On social media, community members posted messages of encouragement, affectionately referring to her as Granny and using the hashtag #GoGrannyGo. In this narrative, Jonathan was vilified as a monster, while Sandra was portrayed as an innocent, frail, elderly woman. Jennifer revealed that most of her family had bought into Sandra's self-defense story, effectively disowning both Jonathan's memory and herself. Throughout the ordeal, Sandra's husband Fred stood by her side, offering unconditional support. The medical examiner concluded that Jonathan Hoffman's death was a homicide resulting from the multiple gunshot wounds he suffered. An examination of the wounds revealed stippling, indicating that the gun was fired from varying distances. Additionally, a toxicology report revealed the presence of synthetic marijuana, also known as spice, or specifically K2, in Jonathan's system. At the time, spice was widely available in West Bloomfield, particularly among teens and young adults, who could purchase it at gas stations without identification. There were numerous reports of individuals experiencing adverse reactions to the substance, including violent behavior after consumption. 1 month prior to Jonathan's death, a disturbingly similar incident occurred involving another student from the same high school. Michael Cipriano, a classmate of Jonathan's, murdered his father, Robert, after a heated verbal argument. According to reports, Michael was under the influence of the synthetic drug spice at the time of the attack. Jonathan's sister, Jessica, harbored a deep affection for her brother, but she was also aware of his emotional instability and occasional violent outbursts. Despite her reluctance to consider it, she couldn't shake the suspicion that her brother might have harmed their grandmother, leading her to ultimately shoot and kill him. 2 months after her arrest, Sandra was arraigned in circuit court and indicted on 2 additional charges: possession of a firearm and committing a felony. Furthermore, she faced a distinctive charge known as open murder, which is only applicable in select states such as Nevada and Michigan. This unique charge encompasses both first and second-degree murder. Prosecutor Paul Walton was concerned that the jury might hesitate to convict a grandmother of premeditated murder, so he opted to present the jury with a broader range of options. This decision displeased the defense, who felt that the prosecution was shirking their responsibility. In 2013, Sandra Lane faced trial for the murder of her grandson, sparking widespread national outrage. Many directed blame at the boy's mother, Jennifer, for sending him to Michigan to stay with Sandra. Throughout the trial, the defense portrayed Sandra as a devoted and loving grandmother, but the prosecution disputed her claim of self-defense. They presented telling images of Sandra taken after the shooting, highlighting inconsistencies. Her clothes remained unripped, her jewelry was still intact, and her hair was styled as usual. Moreover, bloody footprints found in the basement, matching Sandra's shoes, implied that she had searched for additional ammunition. After the prosecution rested its case, Sandra's defense team presented their argument to bolster their stance. Sandra's attorney took a calculated risk by allowing her to testify on her own behalf. The attorney believed it was crucial for the jury to hear directly from Sandra herself, giving a first-hand account of the experiences she had while living with her grandson Jonathan in the months leading up to his tragic death. According to Sandra, Jonathan had a history of violent outbursts, often kicking in doors and breaking objects. On one occasion, he even shattered a computer monitor. On the day of the incident that ultimately led to Jonathan's death, Sandra alleged that he struck her in the head, leaving her feeling threatened and terrified. As a result, she decided to retrieve her gun, hoping it would serve as a deterrent to protect herself. Her intention, as stated in her testimony, was not to take her grandson's life, but rather to stop him from getting back up and attacking her again. However, during cross-examination by prosecutor Paul Walton, Sandra's account began to unravel. Under Walton's pressure, Sandra conceded that her motivation for obtaining the gun was not fear for her safety, but rather a desire to get Jonathan to listen to her. This admission severely undermined her credibility as a witness and made it increasingly difficult to argue self-defense. Experts testified that the K2 spice found in Jonathan's urine at the time of his death suggested he was not under the influence of the drug when he died. The presence of the drug in his urine indicated that it had already been metabolized, casting doubt on Sandra's claim that Jonathan was high on the drug and violent. After hearing the evidence presented at the trial, the jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a guilty verdict for second-degree murder and the use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Sandra was subsequently sentenced to 20 years in prison. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Tara Lynn Grant. Hi everyone. Today we're diving into the baffling case of a mother who disappeared from her home under mysterious circumstances. The police launched an exhaustive investigation, unearthing surprising and even bizarre clues. As they pieced together the truth, even seasoned detectives were left stunned. This case quickly became one of the most sensational in the country, with its shocking details leaving everyone outraged. Tara Grant was born on June 22, 1972, in Michigan. She grew up on a farm with her parents and sister, developing a deep love for the outdoors, horseback riding, and helping with the farm animals. In school, Tara was a sports enthusiast, participating in cheerleading, basketball, and the school band. After graduating, she attended the University of Michigan, where she met her future husband, Stephen. The couple started dating and soon tied the knot after her graduation. Tara, armed with a business degree, landed a job at a large international company. Stephen, who had ambitions in politics, initially worked as an assistant to a state senator during his university days. However, when the senator retired, Stephen found himself without a job and began working at his father's small tool-making shop. 4 years after their wedding, the couple welcomed a daughter, followed by a son a few years later. They then purchased a new home in a prestigious Macomb County, Michigan neighborhood just outside of Detroit. By this time, Tara had made substantial career progress, but it came at a cost. Her job required frequent travel, often to different states and countries, limiting her to weekend visits with her family. As a result, Stephen assumed most of the childcare responsibilities. His flexible schedule at his father's company allowed him to spend more time with the kids, but juggling work and childcare remained a challenge. To alleviate this, they decided to hire a full-time nanny. Through a special program, they found a young woman from Germany who would live with them and care for their children. Thanks to Tara's job, they could afford this arrangement, and the new nanny quickly bonded with their children, taking on most childcare duties. With his newfound free time, Stephen also started working part-time as a youth soccer coach. But despite their comfortable financial situation, Tara's constant absence put a strain on her relationship with Stephen. With her only being home on weekends, their arguments became more frequent. Tara held on to the hope that her next promotion would allow her to adjust her schedule and spend more quality time at home, but until then, she was constantly away on business trips. This uneasy routine continued until February 14, 2007, when an unexpected turn of events unfolded. On Valentine's Day, Stephen grew concerned and called the police, reporting that Tara had been out of touch for 5 days, a rarity. He recounted the events of February 9th, when Tara returned from a business trip, only to announce she had to leave a day early, leaving them with just 1 day together. The tension between them escalated into another argument, and Tara began packing her suitcase. Stephen overheard her making a hushed phone call, saying, "I'll be waiting at the end of the street," before she swiftly departed, getting into a dark-colored car. Since then, Tara had been unreachable, ignoring all of Stephen's calls. The police's first question was why Stephen had waited 5 days to report Tara's disappearance. But Stephen claimed he hadn't been initially concerned, thinking she'd simply left early for her business trip and was ignoring his calls due to their recent argument. However, as the days passed, he began to worry when she failed to contact the kids, aged 3 and 7, as she normally did when away. Then, on Monday, Tara's boss called to say she'd missed a meeting, which was highly unusual and suggested she hadn't gone to work at all. Stephen informed Tara's relatives about her disappearance, but they were skeptical, assuming she'd taken a break from him and their constant arguing. After all, Tara had confided in her parents about the strain her job was putting on their relationship and the frequent rows that had become a regular feature of their lives. Her relatives thought she'd soon return home, needing time and space from Stephen. As time passed, Tara's absence continued and her silence persisted. Eventually, Stephen's concern turned to worry, and he contacted the police. During the police interrogation, the officers noticed several suspicious scratches on Stephen's body. When questioned about a possible physical altercation with his wife, Stephen attributed the marks to his frequent work with metal parts at his father's shop, citing regular scratches as an occupational hazard. Following the station interview, the detectives requested a search of the couple's home, which Stephen granted. Upon arrival, they found that all of Tara's belongings, including her personal documents and purse, were missing, along with her luggage. Stephen also provided access to Tara's computer, allowing the detectives to review her bank account activity. The lack of transactions since her disappearance seemed unusual, as one would expect some financial activity if she had indeed traveled, such as booking a flight or hotel. During the search of the house, detectives failed to uncover any clues that could explain Tara's disappearance. With no signs of a crime, they were left to retracing her steps since February 9th. The local police department, accustomed to handling minor disputes and nonviolent incidents in the area, was inexperienced in investigating such cases, given the region's reputation as one of the safest in the country. Stephen was outraged when asked to take a polygraph test, feeling accused by the police. He tearfully insisted he would never harm his wife. The police departed, considering their next moves, but Stephen surprisingly called them the following morning, ready to cooperate. However, just moments later, his lawyer intervened, advising against the interrogation. The police had no choice but to focus on Stephen as the prime suspect, being Tara's husband. Standard procedure aside, they had no other leads to pursue. Tara's relatives, friends, and colleagues all claimed to have had no contact with her since February 9th and were clueless about her whereabouts. Moreover, her bank account remained inactive, despite her likely need for financial transactions. Detectives shifted their focus to Stephen, and it didn't take long to uncover an important detail. His driver's license had been revoked, yet he continued to drive. They waited for him to get behind the wheel and then arrested him. However, Stephen still felt like he was being treated as a suspect and refused to cooperate with the police. His lawyer quickly secured his release, and Stephen returned home. The police persisted in their search for clues, obtaining Tara's mobile phone records in the process. They found that her last call was made on the day she vanished, when she called Stephen from the airport, saying she'd be home soon. After that, Stephen made numerous calls to her, but they all went to voicemail. The detectives listened to these recordings in which Stephen repeatedly asked her to answer or call back, accusing her of neglecting their children. He also pleaded with her to come home for their sake. The phone itself was turned off, and according to the cell phone carrier's data, it last connected to cell towers near Tara's house on the evening of her disappearance. Notably, there were no incoming calls during that period. As we recall, Stephen revealed that Tara had received a call before leaving the house, with the caller stating she would wait for her on the street. However, upon reviewing Stephen's voicemail recordings, detectives sensed genuine concern for his wife's well-being, accompanied by anger towards her decision to leave their children behind. Despite this, they didn't clear him as a suspect just yet. The investigation stalled, yielding no new leads, as Stephen persisted in refusing police cooperation, accusing them of misallocating resources on him rather than focusing on finding Tara. Conversely, he actively courted the media, which began extensive coverage of the case from its early stages. Tara's enigmatic disappearance sparked widespread public interest, and Stephen became a constant presence in front of cameras, daily pleading for her safe return. As the case unfolded, the company that had facilitated the hiring of the nanny for Stephen and Tara took action, ultimately deciding to send her back to Germany. Prior to her departure, she provided a statement to the authorities, speaking highly of her experience in their household. She also revealed that on the evening Tara returned home, she had been out at a bar with friends. Upon her return, she encountered Stephen, who appeared distraught, informing her that Tara had just exited the house. Despite refusing to cooperate with the police, Stephen hired a former FBI agent as a private detective to investigate Tara's disappearance. However, this effort also yielded no results. With no leads, the police decided to take a different approach. They contacted the agency that helped Tara and Stephen find their nanny, and there they made an interesting discovery. Before hiring the nanny from Germany, the couple had employed 6 other nannies, none of whom stayed in the job for long. When detectives spoke to these former nannies, almost all described Stephen's behavior as not only strange, but also intimidating. According to their accounts, Stephen would rummage through their belongings, ask them inappropriate questions, and frequently yell at them, treating them like they were his subordinates. The police were puzzled by the stark contrast between these descriptions and the German nanny's glowing account of her time with the family. They obtained permission to monitor her emails and phone calls, which led to a surprising revelation. Detectives uncovered messages between the nanny and Stephen, revealing that they had been having an affair. It turned out that the 19-year-old nanny had been in a romantic relationship with Stephen during Tara's business trips, and this continued until she was forced to leave the country. Although the police considered Stephen's infidelity a significant lead, it did not directly link him to Tara's disappearance. Thus, they continued searching for additional evidence. During interviews with Tara's relatives and friends, detectives discovered that almost everyone had disliked Stephen since she married him. They described him as behaving strangely, trying to control her every move, and having poor relationships with her family members. The investigation further revealed that Stephen's former girlfriend, whom he dated before meeting Tara, contacted the police with some information. She disclosed that Stephen had reached out to her several months prior, and their conversations gradually became more intimate over time. Stephen eventually expressed his desire to start a relationship. He took on almost all parenting responsibilities and was a better mother than she was. When reporters asked about their financial situation and whether he had been living mostly on Tara's money, Stephen became angry and insisted he didn't need a penny from her. During the interview, Stephen made accusations of infidelity against Tara, but he failed to provide any evidence to support his claims. Throughout the conversation, he consistently denigrated Tara, emphasizing the difficulties he had faced in their marriage. Meanwhile, the detectives made significant progress in their investigation. Previously, they had been unable to obtain a search warrant for Tara's home due to lack of sufficient grounds, and Stephen had refused to grant them voluntary access. However, after the discovery of the blood-stained bag in the park, the judge finally granted the warrant. As the police arrived at the house, Stephen returned from the interview. Upon being informed of the search warrant, he unlocked the door for the detectives before contacting his lawyer. The lawyer asked the police if his client, Stephen, was under arrest, and they replied that he was not. Stephen then announced that he would take his dog for a walk, retrieved it from the house, and left the premises while the police conducted a search. As the police searched the house room by room, they eventually reached the garage, where one of the detectives spotted a large green container holding several plastic bags. Upon opening one of the bags, they discovered an unknown substance along with what appeared to be women's clothing. Opening another bag, the officer was horrified to find what likely were human remains. In total, the container held 5 bags, and the detectives quickly confirmed that they contained the remains of a woman. The police realized that they had found Tara's body and that Stephen was likely her killer. However, Stephen had not returned, so the police immediately launched a search for him, fearing he might flee or harm someone else, knowing that he would likely face prison time. Meanwhile, officers called in reinforcements to search the nearby park, as only a portion of Tara's remains were found in the garage. Over 100 officers from neighboring districts were dispatched to assist in the search. Their efforts quickly paid off, as they found another part of the body several hundred yards from where the bag was discovered, and later they found the head. Due to the cold temperatures, the remains were well preserved, allowing detectives to confirm that they belonged to Tara. As the search continued, the police found several more body parts, and when night fell, the search was suspended until morning. All this time, detectives were also trying to track down Stephen, but they were unsuccessful. They contacted his friends, and one of them came forward, saying Stephen had phoned him to let him know the police were searching his house and asking for a ride from the street. The friend drove to the location and picked Stephen up, taking him to his own home. During the drive, the friend noticed Stephen's strange behavior. He was terrified, his hands were trembling, and it seemed like he was on the edge of a nervous collapse. Once they arrived at the friend's house, Stephen asked to see his kids and requested to borrow the friend's car. At the time, Stephen's children were living in another state with his sister. The friend handed over his pickup truck, and Stephen took off. The police asked for information about Stephen's phone and credit cards, which enabled them to rapidly trace his journey. They found that Stephen had made several cash withdrawals on his way to the neighboring state and had phoned his sister, leading the police to conclude that he was heading towards his children. They immediately set off in that direction. Just then, an unexpected call came in from Germany. It was from the nanny with whom Stephen had previously been in a romantic relationship. She informed the police that Stephen had just called her, confessing to killing Tara. According to Stephen, the couple had an argument that evening, during which he yelled at her. Tara slapped him in the face, and in a fit of rage, he pushed her, causing her to fall and hit her head on the floor, resulting in her death. The police had no doubt about Stephen's involvement, but they still had to track him down. They searched the area along the highway to the neighboring state for several hours and eventually found the car belonging to Stephen's friend abandoned near the entrance to the national park. However, Stephen himself was nowhere to be found. The police then focused their search on the park, and several hours later, with the help of thermal cameras, they finally located him. He was lying under a tree, wearing only light clothing, and the officers realized he was on the verge of dying from hypothermia. In an altered state, Stephen was talking to trees and muttering incoherent phrases. The police quickly airlifted him to the hospital. Doctors managed to save his life. However, it took some time for Stephen to fully recover. While in the hospital, Stephen was charged with murder, and the detectives handed the case over to the court on the same day. Notably, his lawyer withdrew from defending him, citing that he needed to be able to look at himself in the mirror in the mornings when asked why. A new lawyer was assigned to Stephen, and meanwhile, forensic experts examined Tara's remains. A renowned pathologist who had worked on high-profile cases, such as the J.F. Kennedy and John Bennett Ramsey cases, was appointed as the chief medical examiner. After examining the remains, the pathologist concluded that Stephen's initial account of events did not align with reality. Stephen had claimed that Tara died from a head injury, but the actual cause of death was revealed to be strangulation. When Stephen regained consciousness, detectives visited him in the hospital, and he told them what truly happened that evening. He confessed that when Tara came home and announced she had to leave earlier, They got into an argument, and he started yelling at her. As she tried to leave the room, he grabbed her and Tara hit him in the face. Enraged, Stephen retaliated and then strangled her. Stephen dragged Tara's body from the second floor to the garage and put her in the trunk of her own car. At the same time, the nanny returned home, and Stephen lied to her, saying his wife had just left him. The next morning, he took the body to his father's workshop, making sure he was alone. There, he destroyed all of Tara's documents and personal belongings, and then dismembered her body using a saw. This gruesome task made him vomit twice, but he kept telling himself that if he didn't do it, he would spend the rest of his life in prison. After several hours, he packed the remains into plastic bags and put them in a container. He then returned home, leaving the body in the car for a few days. During this time, he was thinking of ways to get rid of the body without arousing suspicion. To create an alibi, he repeatedly called Tara's phone and left messages on her voicemail, pleading with her to come home. One day, Stephen took his children's snow sled to the park, where the bags containing human remains would later be discovered. He placed a container on the sled and pulled it up a hill, away from the crowded areas. However, the rope slipped out of his hands, and the sled rolled down the hill, causing the container to overturn and the bags to spill out. Stephen picked up the bags, put the container back on the sled, and eventually buried them under the snow in a remote area before returning home. Days later, when the police started searching for Tara, detectives announced they were launching a search operation in the park. Stephen became anxious, as he knew one of the bags, the largest one, was not hidden well and feared it would be found quickly. He went to the park, retrieved a few bags, and carried them to his father's workshop, leaving them on the roof. The day before his interview, Stephen took a container from his home to the workshop, retrieved some bags from it, and brought them back to his garage. The next day, the police obtained a search warrant for his house and found the bags in the container, which led to Stephen's confession. It turned out that Stephen had planned to take his own life rather than surrender, but he couldn't follow through with it, even after nearly freezing to death. During his conversation with the police, Stephen showed no remorse for his actions and would often smile and joke, even when discussing how he got rid of the body. While awaiting trial in prison, Stephen's children stayed with his sister. However, Tara's family was unhappy with this arrangement, and eventually they managed to have the children moved to Tara's sister's care. Although Stephen's family still had visitation rights, Tara's relatives were relieved to have the children out of his sister's hands, especially given her continued sympathy for Stephen and her insensitive jokes about Tara's murder. The trial started in November 2007, and Stephen admitted his guilt from the outset. Despite this, his new lawyer attempted to secure a lighter sentence by highlighting the marital issues that had been plaguing Stephen and his wife for years, largely due to her frequent absences. However, evidence presented during the trial contradicted Stephen's claim that Tara had been planning to leave a day earlier. Her boss testified that she had no additional meetings scheduled and was expected to start work at her usual time. This was corroborated by Tara's sister, who had spoken with her shortly before the murder and was told that she would be home all weekend as usual. Furthermore, there was no credible evidence to suggest that Tara was having an affair. Her boss confirmed that their relationship was purely professional, and this was supported by their email exchanges and text messages. Even Stephen himself acknowledged that he had no basis for believing this. Ultimately, the prosecution was unable to prove that Stephen had planned the murder in advance. It appeared that he had committed the crime in a fit of rage, which could have led to a charge of second-degree murder rather than first-degree murder. On December 21, 2007, a jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict against Stephen, and he received a minimum 50-year prison sentence. Despite his lawyer's efforts to appeal the verdict, it was unsuccessful. Stephen has since been serving his sentence in prison, but there is more to his story. The murder of Tara garnered widespread national attention, and Stephen seemed to revel in the notoriety. While incarcerated, he began writing a book and sought his sister's assistance to have it published. They even explored the possibility of adapting it into a film, with Stephen considering which renowned actor could portray him. In 2008, new information emerged. Stephen's children confided in their aunt, revealing that they had actually seen their father kill their mother on that fateful evening. They had come out of their room after hearing screams and witnessed the entire traumatic event. When this news broke in the media, Stephen's relatives accused the children of lying and continued to defend him. In the same year, it was also discovered that Stephen's father, who had not supported his son, was overcome with grief and guilt, and his body was found in his own home. To this day, Stephen remains in prison, and he will not be eligible for parole until 2058. Every year, Tara's relatives and friends organize a marathon along the route in the park where she used to jog regularly, and her children always participate. Despite their father's heinous actions, they have found the strength to move forward and honor their mothers. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Athena Strand. Athena Strand was born on May 25, 2015, in Duncan, Oklahoma, a small American town. Following her parents' divorce, her father relocated to Texas, while Athena remained with her mother in Oklahoma. Despite the distance, her father maintained regular contact, visiting her frequently, and her mother also made sure Athena spent quality time with him, given their amicable relationship. Later, both her parents remarried, and Athena gained two younger sisters, with whom she shared a strong bond, always seeking to spend as much time with them as possible. Athena was a cheerful child, always exuding positivity, with a passion for outdoor play and exploration. In late 2022, at the age of 7, she temporarily relocated to live with her father in Texas until the New Year holidays, after which she would return to her mother in Oklahoma. During her time in Texas, Athena attended a local elementary school. Her father's rural home, surrounded by woods and fields, provided the perfect setting for her to bond with her dad and his new wife, Elizabeth, in the beauty of nature. On November 30th, Athena returned home from school around 4:15 p.m., just like any other day. With her father and grandfather out hunting, she was left alone with Elizabeth. But that evening, Athena's mood was off, leading to an argument with Elizabeth. Upset, Athena retreated to her room, while Elizabeth headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. 20 minutes later, Elizabeth went to call Athena for dinner, but she was nowhere to be found. Elizabeth searched the entire house and yard, but there was no sign of the girl. She then called her husband's relatives who lived nearby, but they claimed they hadn't seen Athena. Elizabeth then called her husband, explaining the situation, and he immediately told her to contact the police and rushed home. At 6:40, Elizabeth dialed 911, and officers arrived within 14 minutes. She recounted the events and shared her theory that Athena might have run away. As soon as Athena's mother heard about her daughter's disappearance, she rushed to the scene. The search continued until almost 5 a.m., but they failed to find any signs of Athena. The area around the house, especially during dark hours, was difficult to access, which complicated the search. At 7 a.m., the police resumed their search, this time with more officers. As news of Athena's disappearance spread throughout the county, hundreds of volunteers joined the effort. Some volunteers searched the area on horseback and ATVs, while the police used drones and helicopters equipped with thermal cameras. Despite their efforts, Athena remained missing by the end of the day. The police were increasingly concerned for her life, given the onset of winter and the 50 degrees Fahrenheit temperature in Texas, which would have been challenging for Athena, who was wearing light clothing. On the third day, the police broadened their search to a radius of miles around the house, suspecting a potential criminal element in Athena's disappearance. Despite initial doubts that she had wandered off, they grew more convinced that she hadn't left the house voluntarily. Over the next few days, They scoured the surrounding area in all directions, covering several public. Even more questions surfaced in the case. According to the document, the victim's death occurred within an hour of her abduction to parents of French and Algerian descent, giving her a unique cultural heritage. This blend of influences likely contributed to her striking features and fiery personality. As the eldest of 4 children, Sabrina was cherished by her family and often held up as a model for her siblings. At the age of 2, her family moved to Paris, France, where she spent most of her childhood and adolescence. However, during her school years, Sabrina's complex and difficult personality began to emerge. Former classmates have described her as arrogant, domineering, self-absorbed, and extremely selfish. She had few friends, either at school or in her neighborhood, as she believed she was superior to those around her. Sabrina was particularly hostile towards bright and outgoing girls, viewing them as rivals and enemies. Despite her stunning physical appearance, she was a striking brunette with brown eyes and an impressive figure. Sabrina's inability to form genuine connections with others held her back from pursuing a career in modeling, where her looks could have taken her far. Instead, she often sought to manipulate those around her. As a child, Sabrina showed promise in sports and had some interest in music, but her lack of persistence and inconsistent effort hindered her from achieving success in either area. Later, Sabrina alleged that she was mistreated by her maternal relatives in France during her childhood, but these claims were never confirmed. In contrast, her family maintained that they spoiled her and that she always sought attention. During her teenage years, Sabrina's athletic ambitions were prematurely halted by a back injury, which in turn led to her dependence on prescription painkillers. In an attempt to obtain these drugs illegally, she was arrested and received a warning from the police. Sabrina was extremely self-absorbed, constantly craving attention and admiration for her appearance. She firmly believed that her future would be filled with luxury, glamour, and interactions with celebrities, and was even convinced she was born to be a star. At times, her fantasies became so vivid that they distorted her perception of reality, making her believe she belonged in the Hollywood elite. Sabrina holds a degree in English and French literature from the Sorbonne, but since 2006, she has falsely claimed to work in various roles in the fashion industry, such as stylist, makeup artist, fashion designer, or designer, despite lacking actual expertise. Sabrina, known for her stunning looks, has a history of captivating men and exploiting their affection. However, she never considered any of her suitors worthy of a serious relationship, waiting instead for a submissive partner who would obey her every command. After completing her education, Sabrina remained unclear about her life goals, feeling entitled to everything without putting in effort. Nevertheless, she enrolled at the prestigious Sorbonne University and simultaneously worked at a sweet shop to support herself financially. It was there, at the age of 18, that she met Wissam Medouni. Medouni, 6 years her senior, was a manager at a major French company's would be a great way to start her nanny career. She quickly formed a close bond with the children, completed her household chores as specified in her contract, and had sufficient time and resources to improve her English language skills and explore the city's attractions. This peaceful period lasted for several months, and all appeared to be going well. Problems arose when Medouni lost his job, leaving the family with only one stable source of income, the monthly child support payments from Walton. Sabrina then demanded that Walton increase these payments, but he requested a DNA test to confirm his paternity first. As a result, the family struggled financially, finding it hard to afford their rent and basic necessities. Sabrina, who was unwilling to give up her luxuries and determined to maintain her socialite lifestyle, became increasingly irritable and aggressive, often taking her frustrations out on the young nanny. With their remaining funds, the couple attempted to start a bakery business, but it failed. Sabrina then turned to Walton, asking for a large sum of money to launch her clothing line, but he categorically refused. This led to tears and complaints from Sabrina about poverty. Sabrina frequently vented to Leonette about her ex-lover, and the nanny tried to console her employer. One theory claims Sabrina Cooder masterminded a blackmail plot targeting Walton. She allegedly planned to frame Sophie as Walton's partner in crime and lover, planted in their home to cause chaos and put their children in danger. Sabrina supposedly believed Walton was using Sophie as a tool for revenge, motivated by the nanny's supposed infatuation with him. Cooder allegedly wanted to record Sophie's fabricated confessions and present them to the police as evidence, which would be enough to demand compensation from Walton for his alleged wrongdoing. However, Sophie refused to give false statements on camera. An alternative theory, as argued by Cooder's lawyers in court, suggests that due to her mental health issues, Sabrina genuinely believed in her conspiracy theory, viewing Sophie as an enemy and a threat to her family. According to this version, Sabrina didn't coerce the nanny into giving false testimony. Instead, she sincerely believed Sophie was Walton's accomplice, infiltrating their household to harm them. Sophie's life rapidly deteriorated into a living hell. She was housed in a wealthy home, but it felt like a torture chamber in the basement. At first, her employers piled extra work on her without a pay rise. Soon she was trapped in a relentless routine of chores from dawn till late at night, leaving her no personal time or freedom to leave the house. To make matters worse, her salary was stopped, and her passport was confiscated to prevent her from escaping or returning to France, effectively holding her captive. Her family contact was strictly monitored. The situation only got worse. Sophie was hardly fed and was coerced into making false accusations against Walton, a man she had never met or known. Her communication was limited to screams, insults, and threats, with accusations of theft flying her way. She was warned that she would be imprisoned if she refused to comply with their demands against the musician. Couters used brutal tactics when threats failed. Sophie was confined to a cold basement, given scarce food, and physically abused. She grew weak and emaciated. Slaps and hair-pulling escalated to violent assaults, including a broken nose. The beatings became daily, with new cruelties designed to inflict pain. The London house basement became a torture chamber with no escape. In 2017, Sabrina took Sophie Lyons, a malnourished and abused 21-year-old nanny, to a police station to testify against. She was humiliated, forced to submerge her head in a toilet until she began to suffocate. Experts believe it is likely that Sophie died from asphyxiation before being burned, sparing her from the agony of being alive during the burning. Sabrina Cooder and Wissam Medouni denied any wrongdoing and displayed no regret for their heinous act. After killing their nanny, Medouni went to a nearby supermarket where he purchased firelighter fluid to burn the body and groceries for his family's dinner, behaving as if nothing untoward had occurred. In March 2018, the court proceedings against the ruthless duo commenced. Sabrina attempted to depict herself as a victim, alleging that Mark Walton's constant harassment had pushed her into a pathological state. However, medical evaluations revealed that although Sabrina suffered from mental health issues, she was not insane and had full awareness of her actions. Wissam, who was physically fit, was psychologically dependent on Sabrina, submitting to her will and obeying her blindly. On June 26, 2018, the court delivered a guilty verdict to the couple, convicting them of torturing, humiliating, and murdering their nanny in exceptionally cruel circumstances. The court handed down life imprisonment. Ilse discovered that Liga had left the hotel at 11:30 a.m. in casual clothing, taking an auto rickshaw to Kovalam Beach for a walk. However, Liga was nowhere to be found on the beach, despite Ilse's thorough search until nightfall. Ilse reported her sister's disappearance to the police, but they showed little concern, believing Liga would either be found or return on her own the next day. Although they registered a case, the investigation was sluggish, effectively stalled from the start. Ilse took her sister Liga on a trip to India to share with her the country she loved so deeply. Tragically, the trip took a devastating turn. When the Indian police failed to take action for several days, Ilse decided to take matters into her own hands and began searching for Liga. She received support from friends and also informed her husband Andrew about Liga's disappearance, prompting him to fly to India immediately. After Liga went missing, her husband Andrew Jordan and sister Ilse launched a campaign to find her, reaching out to the local press and creating an online appeal. Ilse also tweeted to India's Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, pleading for help and offering a 100,000 rupee reward to anyone with information about Liga's disappearance. Ilse and her friend Alexa, who had flown to India to help with the search, put up posters and distributed flyers in the Kovalam beach area where Liga was last seen. Many locals joined the search efforts. However, it's important to note that Liga struggled with depression and found it difficult to interact with strangers. On the day she vanished, she took an auto rickshaw to the beach and was never seen again. At the time, she had about 3,000 rupees with her, but no passport, which meant she couldn't leave the country. Ashok Kumar, the head of the local police station, claimed that they had no leads in Liga's disappearance. Initially, the police believed she might have gone on a drinking binge or eloped and would eventually return on her own. However, persistent requests for help from Ilse and Andrew prompted the police to launch a search operation in the Kovalam beach area where Liga was last seen. Although a woman's body was found washed ashore in Kanyakumari district, it was not identified as Liga's. Andrew suspected that Liga had been kidnapped by local gangs to be sold, and he attempted to infiltrate these gangs to gather more information. However, he was exposed and warned that if he continued to contact the gangs, he would have to leave the country. A month after Liga's disappearance, there were still no leads to her whereabouts. Ilse continued to search for her sister, visiting Kovalam Beach daily and observing people. She developed a theory that the only way to leave the beach unnoticed was by boat. Andrew returned to India on April 17, 2018, and joined Ilse in a new effort to find Liga, but her body remained unfound. The search for Liga was made more challenging due to her being a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry maintained close contact with Liga's family and collaborated with the Indian authorities throughout the search process. The Latvian embassy also reached out to the Indian Foreign Ministry for special assistance in finding Liga. Additionally, the honorary consul of Latvia in India, whose jurisdiction includes the region where Liga went missing, was involved in the search efforts. At the request of the Coral state government, the Indian Navy and Air Force participated in the search operation. The search effort was extensive, utilizing an AN-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. Unfortunately, despite these efforts, Liga remained missing and the desired outcome was not achieved. By this point, everyone in the local community was aware of the missing tourist from Latvia and was supporting and sympathizing with Andrew and Ilse. On April 20, 2018, Ela received the most awaited yet devastating call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew rushed to the designated spot where the police were waiting to take them to the scene by boat. Elsa's heart was racing as she felt the overwhelming horror of the situation. As they arrived, Elsa was met with a gruesome sight. She recognized her sister's clothes, including the shirt and leggings, on the body. However, the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained a mystery how Liga had ended up in this remote location, accessible only by going through Panatur from Samudra Beach. 2 women came forward, confirming that they had seen Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But the question remained, why would a girl struggling with depression, already alone, take a boat to such a remote and inaccessible place in the forest? The body was taken to the Medical College Hospital for an autopsy, which was recorded on video. The police stated that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was complete. According to the city police commissioner, the body was severely mutilated, with the head found nearby. Although the police have tentatively identified the deceased as Liga, a missing tourist, they need DNA confirmation. Supporting the investigators' conclusion is the fact that Liga's relatives identified the victim by her hair and clothes. One possible theory, according to India's rescue services, is that Liga might have been poisoned by accidentally or intentionally eating the fruit of poisonous pong trees found in the mangrove forest. Between 1989 and 1999, over 500 people died from poisoning by these fruits in Kerala alone. The idea initially seemed absurd, given the body was found hanging upside down without a head. However, if Liga had been poisoned, her body would likely have been in a different position, and her head would have been in place. Indian authorities were spouting absurdities based on misinformation about Liga's complex psychological issues. The investigators also considered the possibility that Liga had willingly abandoned her life. Ilse was concerned that the police would try to cover up her sister's murder by claiming she had voluntarily ended her life, despite the presence of a rope at the scene, which suggested the hiker had hanged herself. Elsa demanded a credible explanation for the missing head, and Ilse sarcastically retorted, "Don't tell me it's just lost." Here are the forensic test results that Ilse and the public were waiting for. The evidence is overwhelming. The autopsy reveals that Liga Skoma was strangled to death by multiple people during a violent attack. There were blood pools in her brain, bruising on her neck, and external injuries on her body, likely sustained during the struggle. Although the body was decomposing, the characteristic injuries on her throat cartilage indicate that someone forcefully squeezed her throat. The trauma was severe and fatal. Blood clots in her brain confirm strangulation, and bruises were found on her neck and legs, with a total of 9 wounds recorded on her body. Based on the autopsy results, the police no longer consider Liga's death to be voluntary. Instead, they believe she was murdered after putting up a struggle. Ilse, Liga's sister, felt a sense of relief that the police were now taking the case seriously and hoped they would soon find the killers. As part of their investigation, the police started questioning local drug dealers and card players. They also spoke to local residents, 2 of whom reported seeing Liga walking alone to the area where her body was later discovered. However, the police had doubts about the credibility of these eyewitnesses. Liga's family has criticized the Indian police, accusing them of incompetence. They believe that if the police had launched a search for Liga immediately, the tragedy might have been prevented. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is thought to have been kidnapped from a nearby beach, taken by boat, and then strangled. A special team of investigators has been formed to find those responsible for the crime. So far, around 40 suspects have been questioned, and arrests are expected to be made in the coming days once the authorities have gathered sufficient evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of 2 men who were accused of murdering Liga Skron. According to the police, Liga Skron was lured by the 2 men, who then subjected her to physical abuse before dismembering her body. The 2 alleged assailants, now in custody, were local dealers of illegal substances. Both suspects, who were also pimps, fully confessed to the crime while under interrogation. However, the autopsy did not provide much evidence due to the advanced state of decomposition of Liga Skron's body. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Court to review a felony murder case, suspecting that more people were involved in the woman's murder. He noted that both defendants had recanted their guilty pleas, suggesting that they may have confessed due to torture, a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband a review of the case, citing a lack of direct evidence. Andrew was outraged when the trial was postponed for 2 months. He had previously accused the authorities and police of incompetence and attempting to cover up the murder to avoid scaring off tourists. The suspect's lawyers requested and received a postponement, which they are legally entitled to do once without providing a reason. Andrew believed that the more the case was delayed, the more likely it was that the investigation was flawed. Despite his concerns, both suspects remained in custody. An investigation into Liga Skram's murder revealed that two men, Umesh, 32, and Udayakumar, 28, offered her drugs, specifically Ligaskani weed, and then strangled and decapitated her after she was incapacitated. The two suspects were arrested and found to have a history of committing similar crimes on multiple occasions. They worked for a food delivery company in Kerala's capital city and moonlighted as illegal tour guides. Umesh and Udayakumar have been charged with multiple crimes, including destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The location where Liga's body was discovered had previously been used by Umesh as a meeting spot for his male clients. He has a long history of criminal activity, with 13 cases filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have come forward to testify against him. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Liga with the two men in the area. Initially, they denied any involvement, but after Liga's body was found, they confessed to the murder, which was committed during an act of violence. The suspects were arrested, but initially claimed they only saw Liga in Kovalam. After repeated questioning, they eventually pleaded guilty. On December 6, 2022, the court sentenced the two men to life in prison and ordered them to pay 65,000 rupees each in compensation to Ilsa, Liga's sister. India has seen a surge in violent crimes against young girls, with a high number of sexual offenses committed against minors. In response, the government has introduced the death penalty to address the acute problem of crime in the country. The persistence of Liga's relatives, particularly her sister, and the involvement of the press and an influential MP were crucial in ensuring the case was thoroughly investigated. Initially, the local police were not taking the case seriously, suggesting that Liga may have voluntarily disappeared. This is not an isolated incident in this area, where similar cases have occurred before. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alicia Ross. Alicia Ross was born on February 8, 1980, in Markham, Ontario, Canada, to biological parents who relinquished their rights to the child. She was adopted by Marvin and Sharon Ross, who provided her with love and care. Despite her adoptive parents' divorce, they maintained a friendly relationship and continued to support Alicia. Alicia excelled in school, particularly in drawing and photography. She had a passion for traveling and exploring new cities and countries. After finishing school, she spent a year in Australia before returning home and enrolling in university. In the summer of 2005, Alicia went on a hiking trip in the mountains where she met her boyfriend, Sean Hine. On August 16th, Alicia went for a walk in the park with her adoptive mother and their dogs. She seemed happy and shared that she was expecting a promotion at work to the position of senior sales manager. Alicia was proud of her achievement and expressed her desire to introduce Sean to her adoptive parents. That evening, Alicia and Sean went on a date, and after returning home, they had a great time together. Around midnight, Sean left Alicia's house, promising to call her as soon as he got home. When he called around midnight, Alicia didn't pick up the phone. Sean wasn't overly concerned, thinking she had simply fallen asleep. Sean tried to call Alicia again the next morning, but when she didn't answer, he began to worry. Unbeknownst to him, Alicia had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mysterious disappearance that would puzzle investigators and her family for years to come. When Alicia didn't pick up, Sean became genuinely worried and contacted a mutual acquaintance who worked in the same office as Ross. From him, Sean learned that Alicia hadn't come to work, and he immediately rushed to her house on the morning of August 17th. Sharon and Julius, Alicia's parents, were planning to play golf with friends and left the house around 10 a.m. They noticed Alicia's car in the driveway, but thought little of it, assuming a colleague had picked her up. About half an hour later, Sean arrived at the Ross residence and found no sign of Alicia. He called the police to report her missing and also contacted Sharon, informing her of the situation. The police were already present when Sharon and Julius arrived home, alarmed by the news. Sean was the first person to notice Alicia's disappearance and inform the authorities. Moreover, he was the last person to see her alive and well the evening before she vanished. According to him, they had said goodbye at the gate where his car was parked around midnight, and she hadn't been in touch since then. When Sharon approached Alicia's room, she immediately noticed that all her daughter's personal belongings, without which she never left the house, were in their places. Her purse, passport, driver's license, keys, cell phone, bank cards, and cash were all left in the room, indicating she wouldn't have gone anywhere, let alone left without them. The gate was open, but not forced, suggesting that the missing person either let her abductor in herself or willingly left with someone. In the backyard, the police found some disorder. The lawn and flowers were trampled as if someone had fallen there. A pair of cigarettes and the right sandal of the girl, which she had been wearing the evening before, were found on the ground, laid out in a straight line. Neither Alicia nor her parents smoked, so the cigarettes didn't belong to them, and Sean claimed he never smoked that particular brand. Sean was almost immediately considered the prime suspect. Firstly, he was noticeably nervous, and his account seemed somewhat confused and disjointed. Secondly, he was the first to report Alicia's disappearance to the police, even before speaking with her parents and confirming that they too had not seen her. Additionally, law enforcement found biological traces on the girl's bed belonging to both her and Sean. Based on this, the investigation speculated that Alicia might have denied Sean intimacy, and he decided to force her, then trying to cover his tracks and stage her disappearance, which he likely caused by ending her life. When Sean was brought to the station, questioned, and the investigator's theory presented to him, he was stunned. He was dismayed to be the prime suspect and swore he would never harm his girlfriend, as he loved her. He also admitted that they did indeed have intimate moments that evening, but insisted it was consensual. The missing girl's parents also had nothing bad to say about Sean. He hadn't argued with their daughter, hadn't mistreated her, and she spoke only well of him. Their relationship was progressing rapidly and quite happily, so much so that Alicia even hoped to have a future with him. The police were baffled by the disappearance of a young woman, Alicia, who had no reason to leave her life behind. She was awaiting a promotion at her job and was a responsible person, so it was unlikely she would just vanish without a word. If something unexpected had happened, she would have contacted her parents. Yet, she had left without her documents, money, and phone. The police questioned her boyfriend Sean, but lacked enough evidence to detain him. They didn't rule him out as a suspect, though, and kept an eye on him. Sean seemed depressed and upset, and the massive search effort began the day after Alicia's disappearance. The police thoroughly inspected her home and yard, questioned neighbors, and examined the surrounding area. However, no one reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious that night. The police theorized that Alicia vanished between midnight and sunrise, a time when the streets are usually quiet. Flyers with Alicia's photo were distributed throughout the city, and her story was featured in the news, generating significant public interest. The police received dozens of calls daily, but most information turned out to be false or mistaken. Sean participated in the search efforts, despite being the prime suspect, and even gave a media interview, pleading for help and displaying photos of the happy couple. The search for Alicia expanded to include abandoned buildings, wooded areas, and wastelands. Her parents, believing she was alive and being held against her will, appealed to the public for help. The police suspected someone close to Alicia might be involved, possibly killing her, due to the lack of signs of struggle or forced entry. Despite their efforts, no concrete leads were found, and the case remained a mystery. 2 weeks after Alicia's disappearance, Sean was arrested on an unrelated charge of driving under the influence and resisting arrest. This led to speculation that he was drowning his guilt in alcohol. Alicia's parents gave another interview, revealing they had only known Sean through their daughter's accounts and didn't know him personally. They considered the possibility that Alicia might have hidden certain details about her relationship with Sean to avoid upsetting them. The police interviewed Sean's neighbors to see if they had noticed anything unusual, but no significant information emerged. The case seemed to have hit a dead end, with the only option left being to keep pressuring Sean to confess. However, a month after Alicia's disappearance, a surprising twist occurred. Daniel Sylvester, a 31-year-old man who lived nearby, called the police and confessed to killing Alicia, revealing where he had hidden her body. Daniel was a reclusive, unemployed man who lived with his mother in a house adjacent to the Ross family home. Despite living near each other, Daniel and Alicia had never interacted before, but Alicia had seen him a few times and considered him mentally unwell due to his odd behavior. Daniel had severe socialization issues from an early age and harbored deep resentment towards women. He was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder at the age of 8 and had been receiving continuous psychological care, although therapy didn't help much. In his teenage years, he confessed to having dark fantasies of attacking and overpowering a girl, which excited him. Despite these fantasies, specialists were confident that they would remain just in his imagination. After finishing school, Daniel stopped attending therapy sessions and decided not to continue his education. He became a recluse, living in his mother's house, almost completely isolating himself from the outside world. He spent his days sitting in his room, often visiting adult websites, and occasionally ventured out in the evenings to secretly watch his neighbors, peeping into their windows. He especially enjoyed watching when someone was engaged in intimate activities, which excited him. However, Daniel remained a virgin well into his 30s, satisfying himself with solitary activities. The neighbors hardly ever saw him and considered him a harmless guy. However, the mutilated body of Alicia was later found at the location Daniel had indicated, leaving many questions about why the police had overlooked him during their initial investigation. The condition of the remains indicated that the girl had been dealt with extreme cruelty, with injuries that suggested she had been hit by a car. The exact cause of death could not be determined, but at least 3 injuries were incompatible with life. Daniel initially claimed that he had an argument with his neighbor on a bush-covered path between their homes, during which she called him a loser, angering him, and he struck her on the head. When she fell, he kicked her several times in the chest. However, something in his story did not add up, and there were missing details and specifics. Law enforcement had to clarify the circumstances and chronology of events to learn how exactly the girl received such injuries. Daniel spied on his neighbor Alicia and her boyfriend on the fateful evening. He watched them from a window as they were intimate, then moved back to the bushes, but didn't leave. When Alicia's boyfriend left, she saw Daniel spying on her and became angry, yelling at him and calling him a pervert. She then turned to go back into the house, but Daniel snapped, leading to a brutal beating and murder. The word pervert triggered Daniel's rage, reminiscent of childhood taunts from girls. He punched Alicia powerfully on the head, knocking her to the ground, then choked and kicked her, inflicting 33 fractures and extensive internal bleeding. After realizing Alicia was dead, Daniel moved her body to his garage, stripped her naked, and masturbated to relieve tension. He then put the corpse in the trunk of his mother's car and disposed of it in a secluded area outside the city. Upon returning home, he showered, changed clothes, and behaved as if nothing had happened. Daniel confessed to the crime but claimed it was unintentional, citing his mental illness and anger issues. However, the prosecution argued that despite his mental health issues, Daniel was fully aware of the consequences of his actions and acted with merciless intent. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation, which confirmed Daniel's responsibility for his actions. Daniel was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 16. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jodi Sanderholm. Jody Leanne Sanderholm was born on September 26, 1987, in Arkansas City to parents Brian and Cindy Sanderholm. As the third of three children, she had an older brother named Jason and an older sister named Jennifer. From an early age, Jody had a passion for dance, which played a significant role in her life. However, she also prioritized her education and excelled in her studies. Jody's academic achievements were impressive, earning her one of 4 valedictorian spots in her graduating class. During her high school years, she was an active member of the National Honor Society, received recognition as a Kansas State Scholar, and was awarded the Outstanding Physics Student of the Year award. Additionally, she was captain of the Ark City High School dance team for 2 years and an instructor for both Ark City Dance and the Universal Dance Association. After graduating, Jody attended Cowley College, where she studied pre-pharmacy and was part of the Cowley Tigerette dance line. On the morning of January 5, 2007, Jody drove to college for a dance rehearsal that was scheduled to end at 10:45 a.m. After the rehearsal, she planned to return home. However, when her mother, Cindy, called her cell phone multiple times, Jody didn't answer, which was unusual for her. Being a responsible and communicative person, Jody always kept in touch with her family, and her mother's repeated calls went unanswered, leaving her with a sense of unease. Cindy left work early to check on Jody, who should have returned from dance rehearsal. But when Cindy arrived home, she noticed Jody's car was missing, which only added to her anxiety. Entering the house, Cindy realized Jody was not there. Her dance uniform, which she usually washed after rehearsal, was nowhere to be found. The shower stall was dry, suggesting Jody hadn't showered after dance class. Cindy soon discovered that Jody had not contacted her father or sister Jennifer either. Jody had a noon appointment, but she didn't show up. Cindy and Brian began calling Jody's friends, hoping someone had seen her. But none of them had since the morning rehearsal ended. The dance team was scheduled to perform at a basketball game that evening, and Jody, as the choreographer, wouldn't have missed it voluntarily. However, she didn't show up. By 6 p.m., Cindy and Brian were still unable to locate Jody, so they contacted the police and reported her missing. The sheriff's office quickly created flyers with Jody's description and began investigating her last known whereabouts, issuing an APB on her vehicle. On January 6th, Jody's best friend, Lori Leglider, whom she had known since high school and had danced with, provided crucial information to the police. The two friends had also attended Cowley College together, where they studied dance. Lori told the police that she had left her job at Sirloin Stockade in Arkansas City around 10 p.m. on Tuesday, January 2nd, and had noticed a light blue car driving by the restaurant multiple times as she departed. Lori noticed a car following her on her way home, which made her feel uneasy. To test her suspicion, she turned onto different streets, but the car behind her kept following. Frightened, she drove to the local police station and parked, hoping the stalker would leave her alone. When she didn't see the car anymore, she drove home. However, she soon saw the car again, so she returned to the police station parking lot and waited in her car for a while before driving home. Lori initially thought it was a prank, but she didn't report the incident to the police. On January 5th, Lori and her friend Jody arrived at the college for a dance team rehearsal. Lori recognized the same light blue car that had been following her, and she saw the driver, 23-year-old Justin Thurber, who was a local resident. Although Lori didn't know Justin personally, she had seen him with his older brother and friends before. After practice, Lori and Jody planned to meet up later, but Jody never showed up. It was then revealed that several dance team members had also seen Justin lurking around the college campus that week. In the initial stages of the investigation into Jody's disappearance, police searched the city thoroughly but couldn't find her car within the first 24 hours. The city of Arkansas is surrounded by open fields and wooded areas, making it a challenging task. To aid their search, authorities brought in a fixed-wing aircraft to scour the region from above. They hoped to spot Jody's car which was larger and easier to detect than a person. The police investigation revealed that the last signal from Jody's cell phone was received from a tower near the Kaw Wildlife Area, a vast wooded region along the Arkansas River. At this point, only one suspect had emerged, Justin Eugene Justin, identified by Lori Legliner and other members of the dance group. Notably, Justin was already familiar to the police due to a prior incident in 2004 when he was charged with illegal possession of banned substances despite his young age. Justin was sentenced but didn't serve time in prison. Instead, he was released. However, just 3 months later, he was arrested again for stealing in Probate Nation, violating his probation. In October 2005, he was charged with disorderly conduct. 3 months after that, he was arrested for petty theft and found with illegal drugs. Then, on December 31, 2006, just 6 days before Jody's disappearance, Justin was arrested for theft once more. After posting a $3,000 bail, Justin was freed on New Year's Eve. The very next day, January 1st, he pretended to be a police officer, causing a public disturbance. When the real police arrived, Justin claimed to have chest pain and was taken to the hospital rather than the police station. It's unclear why he wasn't arrested after being discharged from the hospital, and it's also unclear how he managed to avoid consequences for his actions. A family tie to Cowley County Police might have influenced events. On January 6th, an officer spotted Justin's Cadillac at his parents' house and initiated a conversation. Justin's father invited the officer in. When questioned about his previous day's whereabouts, Justin said he drove to Winfield, 13 miles outside Arkansas City that morning. In Winfield, Justin met up with a friend and 2 acquaintances of his friend, whom he didn't know well. The 4 of them then drove around the countryside in one of the acquaintances' cars until it became stuck on a dirt road near Cedar Vale. Justin claimed that he proceeded to walk towards Arkansas City, a 30-mile journey from Cedar Vale. After 6 hours of walking, he grew tired and called his father to come pick him up. Justin's father backed his son's story, saying he'd picked him up near Cali State Fishing Lake, where Justin was wet and dirty. The officer found the story unconvincing, but lacked evidence to charge him, so let him go. That evening, police questioned Alexis Schwartzel, who had recently ended her 3-year relationship with Justin Thurber. When informed about the investigation into Jody Sanderholm's disappearance, Alexis was shocked. She revealed that Justin had once told her that he had been watching Jody since he was 13 years old, often sneaking peeks at her while she swam in her backyard pool and even peered through her bedroom window, waiting for her to change clothes. Alexis explained that she had broken up with Justin due to his abusive behavior and increasing strange tendencies. She recalled that during intimate moments, he would choke her until she lost consciousness. Moreover, he would ask her to fight him, as it was the only way he could become aroused. The police grew increasingly suspicious of Justin's involvement in Jody's disappearance, despite lacking concrete evidence. Nonetheless, Justin was arrested later that evening, on January 6th. Detective Eric Mata arrested Justin Thurber for bail violation and criminal trespassing because Justin was found on the college campus, which the detective believed he was not supposed to be on. Justin requested to speak with his lawyer when arrested. Around the same time, police officers arrived at Justin's parents' house with a search warrant. During the search, the officers took Justin's shoes, which were wet and drying on a towel. His father had helped him clean the mud from the shoes. The clothes he wore when his father picked him up were also found, but Justin had already washed them. On January 7th, rugged terrain search teams combed the Kaw Wildlife Area for Jody Sanderholm, finding shoe prints matching Justin's and smaller ones. They stopped for the night, resuming the search the next day. En route home, searchers checked Cowley County State Fishing Lake, recalling Justin was wet when picked up by his father. Near a public restroom, investigators discovered several important pieces of evidence. This included a muddy tire track, shoe prints with mud on them, and a portable toilet containing a handwritten note addressed to the parents of Jody Sanderholm. In another toilet, they found dance shoes and a flip-flop sandal that matched the footprints found at the Kaw Wildlife Area. Further searches yielded a collection of personal belongings, including cut-off sweatshorts, a wallet with Jody's driver's license and social security card, a black leotard, a tigerette jacket with her first name on it, a vehicle floor mat, and a car seat cushion. Search efforts focused on Cowley County State Fishing Lake and the Kaw Wildlife Area. On January 9th, specialists used sonar to locate Jody's submerged car. Tragically, her body was found later that day, hidden under debris. DNA evidence linked Justin Thurber to the car and body, but water in the car likely destroyed additional evidence. Forensic investigators found crucial evidence after many hours of work. A hair on Jody's car seat was matched to Justin Thurber through mitochondrial DNA testing. Private DNA expert Barbara Leal analyzed samples from Jody's arm and chest. It was possible that Justin was involved. Cell tower data showed Jody's and Justin's phones were in the same area simultaneously. This was corroborated by Jody's friend Lori, who saw Justin in the college parking lot that day. Security footage confirmed Lori's account, showing Justin following Jody in his Cadillac. Investigators believe that Justin followed Jody from college to her home, where he attacked her after she retrieved letters from the mailbox. A shoe print identical to Justin's sneakers was found by the mailbox, supporting this theory. Footprints matching Justin's shoes were discovered at the Kaw Wildlife Area, and smaller prints matched Jody's shoes found at the lake, along with her other belongings. In the preserve, searchers found footprints of Justin and Jody side by side, indicating they walked together at one point. However, Jody's footprints stopped and Justin's continued deeper into the woods, so he carried her further on his own. His shoe prints were also found near where the body was discovered. Moreover, the three people Justin claimed to have been with on the day of Jody's disappearance denied his story, revealing that his alibi about getting stuck near Cedar Vale was a lie. The police drove Justin to Cedar Vale to verify his alibi, but he couldn't pinpoint the location where he claimed his car was stuck. Back at the police station, Justin agreed to take a polygraph test and requested that his relative, Chad Monroe, who worked for the Cowley County Sheriff's Office, be present during the questioning. The collected evidence was sufficient to indict Justin Thurber. Despite his denial of guilt, the judge set his bail at $1 million. Justin's lawyers attempted to argue that he was mentally incompetent, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Given that Justin had graduated from high school and attended college, the judge deemed the defense's claim of mental retardation unproven. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy testified in court, describing the brutal nature of Jody's last hours. Her body and face were covered in bruises and abrasions, with clear signs of strangulation on her neck, which was ultimately determined to be the cause of her death. Here's what the medical examiner found during the autopsy. The crime was driven by sexual desire and involved an object, a stick. To give you an idea of what happened at the wildlife area without going into detail, it's worth noting that not all violent criminals are as brutal as Justin. At Justin's trial, 7 women, including his ex-girlfriend, testified that they had been stalked by him. One of these women was a co-worker who was so afraid of Justin that she had to have a police officer escort her to her car after work because she had seen him waiting for her earlier. He had left a disturbing gift on her car, a rose, and a note saying he was interested in her. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Jody Sanderholm's car on January 5, 2007. Carrie Morris, a friend of Jody's, saw Jody sitting in the passenger seat of her car as they drove past each other in Arkansas City around noon. Morris noticed that the driver was a large man. She tried to call Jody's cell phone, but there was no answer. Later that day, around 3 p.m., 2 other women reported seeing a car that looked similar to Jody's on a dirt road south of Arkansas City. One of the women identified the driver as Justin in court. After a trial, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict on February 17, 2009, finding Justin guilty on all counts. They recommended that he be sentenced to death. Justin's lawyer attempted to negotiate a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, but Jody's family opposed it. The judge ultimately sentenced Justin to death by lethal injection in March 2009. In 2008, Kansas expanded its stalking laws, increasing police authority and the definition of stalking behaviors. Since his sentencing, Justin Thurber has continued to appeal the court's decision. His lawyers are now arguing that he has a mental disability, which they claim is supported by evidence from 2018. However, the Kansas Supreme Court has put his death sentence on hold, citing a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that prohibits the execution of individuals with developmental disabilities, even if they are mild. Justin was found competent at his original trial. Years later, Jody's mother, Cindy Sanderholm, attended a hearing and was outraged that Justin had written letters to girls while in prison, seeing it as proof of his competency. Justin is currently appealing a death sentence, and a 2020 state law gives him the opportunity to request an attorney to assist with post-conviction DNA testing from the Cowley County District Court. This is significant because, despite it being 16 years since Jody Sanderholm's murder, the case is still not fully resolved. Additionally, the speaker believes that Jody pleaded for her life, but Justin did not spare her, denying her a second chance. Kansas reinstated the death penalty in 1994, but no one has been executed since then. In fact, the last execution in Kansas took place in 1965. Since the reinstatement, 10 people, including Justin, have been sentenced to death, but none of their sentences have been carried out. According to Adam Fan and Steele, spokesperson for the Kansas Department of Corrections, there are no plans for future executions. Jennifer Aldridge, Jody's sister, finds it surprising that Kansas reinstated the death penalty over 20 years ago without a plan for carrying out executions. She believes this issue should have been discussed when the penalty was reinstated. Even if Justin's death sentence is upheld, it is likely that it will not be carried out. Justin Thurber is currently being held at the maximum security El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas. According to a 2014 report by the Kansas Legislative Post-Audit Committee, it costs almost $49,000 per year to keep an inmate in administrative segregation at El Dorado. Furthermore, it's not just the cost of housing a death row inmate, it's also 4 times more expensive to prosecute a case where the death penalty is sought by the prosecution. The Sanderholms feel that paying taxes is an additional unfair burden on top of the emotional pain they're already enduring as they wait for justice in their daughter Jody's case. Brian Sanderholm explained, "Every week, when I see the taxes deducted from my paycheck, it's a painful reminder that I'm supporting the person responsible for our suffering." His wife Cindy echoed his sentiments, saying, "He deserves the maximum punishment, which is what the law intended. We need to reform the law so it can be enforced effectively." If you were in our shoes, what would you want to happen to someone who harmed your child? Cynthia Ann Sanderholm, Jody's mother, sadly passed away on December 2, 2022, at the age of 63.